Chapter 101. The Threads of Bonds Coming Together. 3. Blessing of the The law of three orders encompasses all that is observed in nature. When talking about the essence of things, the matter is the first-order perspective, the magic is the second-order perspective, and the law of nature is the third-order perspective. The blessing of the is a three-dimensional shield created in accordance with these multi-order perspectives. It protects its user not only from physical matter and magic, but also from spells carried out through divination and witchcraft. It uses its user's mana as energy and lasts a total of 10 seconds once activated. It can be used 3 times per day, but its effects cannot be layered together. Oh. Jihu let out an exclamation of awe, but he didn't really understand what the long text meant. All he could gather was that it was a good shield. What charmed him the most was that he didn't need to carry it with his hand like a normal shield, so it's like a phalanx. He could say this only because he didn't know that a real phalanx was a battle formation used by foot soldiers. In any case, he never even dreamed of using a shield since he was a spearman. But that had changed now that he had this bracelet. What if he summoned a shield in a critical moment of a battle? He found it cool just thinking about it. He readily equipped the bracelet on his left wrist and picked up his ice spear. Yop. Hot. He jumped around here and there, pretending to be in the middle of a fierce fight. Suddenly, he imagined himself being attacked by a flying axe and raised his left hand. Woong. As soon as he infused his mana into it, 3 circles colored gold, red, and blue respectively appeared around the bracelet. They intersected each other, forming a triangle with the gold circle on top and the red and blue circles supporting the sides. With this size, it was too small to cover his entire body, but it was big enough to protect his face and upper body. Exactly 10 seconds afterward, the 3 circular shields vanished into thin air. Jihu must have noticed how childish his antics were as he snickered loudly. He continued putting the black belt on and off as he grinned in satisfaction. His body itched now that it gained additional tools for battle. No matter what work fell on his shoulders, he felt like he could go at it happily. But he wasn't ready yet. He needed to reach his goals. After remembering that he had yet to learn Mana Spear, he turned serious. It was late at night, but there was no rule against training at this hour. Today will be the day. After taking out a bunch of javelins from the belt, he hurriedly ran to the outdoor training ground. Murphy's Law, an adage that stated, "Anything that can go wrong will go wrong." Although the meaning of the phrase was a bit ill-natured, that was just how life was. Like the saying, "Cross one mountain and another will show up," misfortunes often came consecutively at the most unexpected time. When things started going wrong, it was to the point people blamed their ancestors or the heavens. Of course, that didn't mean that bad luck was the only thing in their life. Fortune and misfortune were closely related, so there were times in one's long life when good luck came knocking on their door. Sally's Law was the counterpart to Murphy's Law. If there were times when continued misfortunes dragged one's life to the pits of hell, there were times when continued fortunes raised one's life to the ends of heaven. In the case of Jihu, one could say his life in paradise has been a continued cruise. Just like Prihai said, the Haramark royal family was fair in rewards and punishments. In other words, they were quick with their work. Jihu received news from a messenger that the king had already passed the message to the village head. Because of it, Raman village was apparently in a festive mood. It made sense. Haramark wasn't necessarily safe, but it was much better than Raman village as it was farther from the border region and was under the protection of Earthlings and the royal army. The tomb visit was making progress as well. Teresa had hired a trustworthy chief priest and was in the process of preparing written prayers. The plan was apparently to build a shrine to console the ghost saintess. She also added that she would let him know as soon as the preparations were over. With this, the weight on his conscience was lifted. But like the saying, even a jade has a scratch, he wasn't free of worries completely. Tack, a dull sound rang out. A javelin rolled on the ground after hitting a wall and reached a young man's foot. Huck, huck. Jihu was breathing heavily with his back bent when he spotted the javelin near his feet and grabbed it after wiping the sweat off of his forehead. He lost count how many days had gone by. But one thing he was sure of was that he had yet to learn how to throw a simple spear, much less one made out of mana. What's the problem? Theory and experience were different. Even if someone studied hard and amassed knowledge, translating it into flawless action was a different matter altogether. Jihu expected some pushbacks, but the wall blocking his path was too big for him to overcome. To be frank, he was able to learn mana circulation with such ease only because of Saikai's tears. Since he didn't have outside support or a stroke of luck to help him with mana spear, it was only normal for his progress to be slow, even considering the amount of effort he was putting in. In truth, he wasn't even sure if he was making progress. After experiencing this impregnable wall seemingly blocking his path, he couldn't help but agree that his talents were average. Arg, I'm going to go crazy at this rate. Looking back, he realized how fortunate he was in the neutral zone. After all, he had an excellent instructor like Agnes. Although she beat him up and cursed at him every time, she was able to point out his mistakes like a demon and offer sound advice. Should I go give her a visit? It wasn't that this thought never crossed his mind. However, he always convinced himself otherwise. Paradise wasn't the neutral zone. He couldn't keep relying on others forever. Moreover, he was the one who decided to become the trailblazer of a thorny path. He couldn't start complaining this quick. Once he shook his head, sweat flew in every direction, and after straightening his back, he began to pick up the javelins strewn on the ground. He practiced throwing javelins from early dawn to noon. It was then that he thought it wouldn't be bad to go for a change of pace and spend 1 or 2 hours doing physical training. He carefully placed 10 javelins together and headed to the first floor with sandbags around his arms and legs. Jihu was so absorbed in training that he didn't know another great fortune was finding its way toward him, around the time that the sun was hanging in the middle of the sky. Slaughterer, it's the slaughterer? You-wah-ah, you-wah-ah. As the earthlings on Haramark's streets hightailed the hell out of there, Agnes was leisurely walking toward Carp Deem's office. She wasn't going there on official business. In fact, it was a strictly personal visit. There really wasn't much to it. She had simply promised someone to help him with his training and was on her way to keep her word. Although it was only a verbal promise, she made it her principle to never make a promise she couldn't keep. Thus, she saw it as her duty to take responsibility for her words. And when she arrived at her destination, tack, tack, she was greeted by the sound of something striking the ground periodically. As someone who was only a step away from becoming a unique ranker, Agnes could clearly hear the faint groaning coming out of the office. As she slowly made her way closer, she saw someone walking toward her from the other side of the street. Unlike most others in the city, this person showed no signs of being afraid of Agnes. The name Agnes was a source of terror in Haramark. The reason Haramark was called the crime city had much to do with the infamy it amassed during its past internal strife. To explain in greater detail, the way Agnes dealt with her enemies could be summarized easily. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. She murdered enemies who were infamous for their cruelty even more cruelly. When she fought people who were crazy, she became even crazier than them. One time, she cleanly dismembered her enemies' corpses and neatly placed their body parts on a platter before serving it during a negotiation dinner. Another time, she slaughtered every member of an enemy organization and decorated a Christmas tree using their corpses and organs. And as if that wasn't enough, she even held an exhibition to show it off. It wasn't just once or twice that Agnes has done something ridiculous under Cecilia's principle. An ally's blood will be washed away with an enemy's blood. With such horror stories under her belt as Cecilia's vanguard, it was no wonder why everyone was so terrified of Agnes. However, the man walking toward her didn't seem to care in the slightest. Of course, Agnes had no reason to care either, so she passed him without paying too much attention to him. No, she tried to pass him, but she couldn't. This was because she saw the man's features as he drew closer. The fedora on his head and his dark blue coat made him look as if he just entered paradise. He carried a long wooden stick in one hand. Rather than a staff used by magicians, It seemed to be a walking cane that he carried around as a habit. He was shorter than Agnes and looked feebler too. The wrinkles on his aged face was a poignant reminder of the passage of time. However, even his age couldn't hide the fiery vitality burning in his eyes, and when Agnes caught sight of them, her eyes shot open in surprise. She even stopped entirely. Tack. The old man must have seen her too as he grabbed his cane tightly and halted his steps. Ho! He took off his fedora, revealing his neatly brushed white hair. His raised eyebrows softened slightly, showing he was just as surprised as Agnes was. You're... A rough, elderly voice flowed out. Agnes snapped out of her daze and respectfully cusped her hands together before bowing. I didn't expect to meet you here. Yes, it's been a while. I see that you are still not talking to me comfortably. Hoo-hoo, that again? I believe I've already told you about that several times before. You're right. I can't help but feel a little disappointed, but it's also quite nostalgic. Agnes nodded her head and continued. It feels like it was only yesterday that I was crying tears and snot after receiving Master's lessons. The old man protested with a look that said, What are you talking about? I don't remember seeing you cry. The Agnes I remember always knew what to do even without someone to guide her. I cried when I was alone at night. Crying in front of others would hurt my pride. The old man's jaw dropped and he chuckled without sound. I see you learned to make jokes. All I did was look after you for a bit because of that person's request. Ah, is she doing well? If you are talking about Boss Cynthia, she is indeed doing well, all thanks to you. Agnes replied respectfully, All thanks to me. Oh, please, flattering this old man won't get you anything. No, I am sincere. Agnes revealed a rare smile before slowly putting her hand over her chest. The memories I have training under Master are like treasures inside an old drawer. Calling them treasures is a bit. They're certainly treasures. Just like Boss, I was saved multiple times by Master's teachings. In fact, it happened just a few weeks ago, too. Ho, something big must have happened. The old man scratched his face, which was now slightly red. It's not like I taught anything great. After all, Cynthia and you always surpassed my expectations, Fufu. A warm smile spread across his face as if he was remembering the old times. After a moment of silence, Agnes opened her mouth with a hint of expectation. I may be being impertinent, but... No. The old man shook his head before she could even finish her sentence. I came here because of a promise I made Dylan. You see, he made me promise to drop by every once in a while. I thought so. Agnes put on a complicated look. She could tell her old master had no clue what happened to Dylan. Anyways, what business do you have here? A request. Agnes shook her head. I'm here to meet someone for a personal reason. Oh, no one pops up in my head. I doubt it's Chung Cho-hong or that Hugo. Dylan. It's neither of the three. Neither of the three. There's one more person. Realizing that Carp Diem had a new recruit, his interest was immediately piqued. Someone had passed Dylan's difficult screening. And not only that, this person managed to get Agnes to visit him personally. Let's go in. Since it's been a while, why don't we have some tea? No, it's fine. I will come back at a later time. Agnes was grateful for the offer but refused him politely. The old man in front of her would soon face a harsh reality. The person to tell him this should be a member of Carp Diem, not her. Of course, that wasn't the only reason. It's not anything urgent, and besides, it seems I have no reason to go anymore. The old man nodded. He wasn't sure what she meant, but he had no reason to stop her when she wanted to leave. Take care. It was nice seeing you after so long. Yes, I hope you enjoy your stay in paradise. After giving a courteous bow, Agnes vanished in an instant. Once she left, the old man looked up at the old, dilapidated building. Nostalgia and wistfulness wet his eyes, but this feeling only lasted a moment. Soon, when he walked into the building, his eyes faced forward. He could see the first-floor training ground beyond the window. As it was a place he constructed with burning passion and painstaking effort, he had countless memories in that little space. But currently, a youth he had never seen before was training arduously while dripping with sweat. He didn't know who he was, but he had an idea. Is he that newbie? Perfect, I was curious. The old man didn't enter the training ground and watched the youth over the window. Soon he rubbed his chin. He's quite decent for a newbie. That was his evaluation. However, at a closer look, he noticed a few additional things. He wasn't just giving it his all. Although he was lacking in a few areas, he seemed to be putting in a great deal of focus on his movements and breathing. From the way he periodically stopped to rest, the old man could tell he received professional training. I don't know who taught him, but whoever it was, they did a fine job. He gave a rare compliment. Soon the youth unfastened his sandbags and went outside. Shick, tack, shick, tack. When the old man followed him to the backyard, he could periodically hear the sound of something cutting through the air before striking something. The youth was repeatedly throwing a javelin at a wall. The old man tilted his head while watching him secretly. What is he doing? It looked like he was trying to learn his skills directly. That was something to be praised, but the old man didn't stop tilting his head. Something seemed to be bothering him as an uncomfortable look emerged on his face. Is he practicing hitting a mark? He suddenly caught sight of the youth's notebook on the ground. Seeing how it was full of text, he nodded his head and looked back up. The youth was still throwing javelins without realizing someone was watching him. Wait, this is javelin throw? After looking back and forth between the youth's movements and the notebook, the old man made a dumbfounded expression. That idiot. He didn't consider himself a nosy person, but it was a different matter if the youth was a member of Carp Diem. In the end, he couldn't bear to watch him and opened his mouth. Oi, shick, tack, he called the youth, but there was no response. Oi. Once he raised his voice, the youth finally reacted. Clear eyes and white skin. He looked quite delicate for a man. However, looking at his robust body, the thought that the youth was weak vanished. When the youth turned around, the old man raised his cane. Lift up your arm. Pardon? He retorted with a startled face. However, the old man continued without giving any explanation. Your right arm, turn it halfway clockwise. Look where your elbow is and turn your hand. The old man suddenly shouted. The youth flinched before reflexively turning his pulled-back right arm clockwise. Like this? Try again. Hearing the old man abruptly telling him to try again, the youth blinked his eyes confusedly. Don't just stand there and start with the run-up. The youth flinched at the old man's frosty tone and moved. His left foot went out first, followed by his right. Immediately, the old man scowled. Stop, stop! He stomped forward, then tapped the ground in front of the youth's foot with his cane. I told you to do a run-up, not a tap dance. Why are you running with your left heel up? Hearing this, the youth grumbled as if he was wronged in some way. But that's part of the run-up. The run-up is only there to help you build speed and rhythm. The crossover steps are when you set up for a good release position. Right now, you're raising your foot when you're kicking off the ground. It's not like you're a clown at a circus, so why are you starting off by tiptoeing? But keep your left foot on the ground. Sial Jehu was about to protest when he lost to the old man's vigor and put his left foot down. The old man smacked his lips, looking unsatisfied even after the youth did as he was told. Stay like that. He entered the building and came out with a small hammer. After snatching the javelin out and putting the hammer in the youth's hand, he moved behind the youth and held onto his right hand. All right, let's try that again. Even as he was startled by the strength of the old man's grip, the youth kicked off the ground as his instincts told him to. However, the fiery scolding didn't stop. Don't push down on the ground with the ball of your right foot. Use your toes. Your left foot is going up because you're not transferring your strength properly. Why, yes. Don't be flimsy with your arms. You're starting with your foot, but your left hand is the key that ties everything together. Keep it straight like you're pulling on air. Make that rotational energy transfer to your right arm. Yes, from an outside perspective, it was quite a funny sight. The youth had his captured right arm pulled behind him while his legs were moving forward like he was techno-dancing. However, the youth was on the verge of collapsing from shock. The entire motion felt different than what he was used to. Some part of it made him feel strange, but because the old man was helping him stay on track, his movements connected rather smoothly. In other words, what he had been doing until now was wrong. Then suddenly, the grip holding on to his right hand loosened. He let go even as he was taken aback. His body moved on its own, having remembered the new posture. His right foot ran up. while the left foot stepped on the ground with strength. He pulled his left arm in while turning his body counterclockwise, and the resulting rotational force transferred to his right arm. When his right arm almost flew forward automatically, Seol Jihu's eyes widened in shock. So this is why. When his half-rotated arm returned to its original position, it rotated and amplified the rotational force that was transferred up from the rest of his body. Now, when the loud shout rang out, Seol Jihu instinctively threw the hammer forward. Pack. He felt a satisfying explosiveness from his hand. This was his first time experiencing this feeling. It felt like he just fired a gun. Quack. He was staring at his hand in a daze when the sudden explosion made him raise his head. The tiny hammer he threw had pierced deep into the wall. Immediately, several messages popped up, alerting that he learned spear throw. Impossible. He couldn't believe it. Something that had been troubling him for the longest time was resolved in an instant. There's a difference between a short throw and a long throw. A deep voice resounded. Seol Jihu went, "Ah," and turned to face the old man. "You're trying to learn the long throw, but your target is placed too close. It's no wonder why you were having trouble." Seol Jihu stared at him like a stone statue. He had no clue who he was. But he knew that the mysterious old man had helped him with his training. A fortuitous encounter. It was something that often occurred in novels, a secluded eccentric suddenly appearing and helping the main character. He was well acquainted with such convenient plot devices. When he activated 9 eyes, he almost closed his eyes out of shock. The golden light pouring out from the old man was something he had never experienced before. It was so dazzling that he became certain of his conjecture. It's my fortuitous encounter. He suddenly thought back to when he was standing in Haramark's plaza, looking at the color of Carp Diem's recruiting parchment. He refused to give up this opportunity. The old man noticed the youth's clear-as-day gaze and took off his fedora. "I forgot to introduce myself." He let out a dry cough and opened his mouth. "Help me," Seol Jihu leaped on top of him. "HHM," the old man was taken aback. "Help me." "Oh, oi, calm down first, and oh, mysterious eccentric, I beg you. I'm currently—" "Quiet. Geez, just hear me out first." Seol Jihu clung to him as if his life depended on it. Because of it, the old man had to struggle for a long time to prevent his pants from sliding down. It wasn't until 3-4 days after the old man and the youth's meeting that Chohong returned to Carp Diem. "In the name of Ira, I shall henceforth bestow the title of Level 5 Templar to Chung Chohong. I expect great feats befitting the League of High Rankers from you." Hot. After applying to become a high ranker as soon as she came back, Chohong walked out of the temple proudly. She couldn't hide her happiness after achieving what she always dreamed of. With a face full of smiles, she raised the shopping bags in her hands. "He'll like it, right?" She knew she returned quite late, so she brought gifts to bring Seol Jihu. As long as she explained her circumstances and offered him some gifts, she believed he wouldn't be so angry. The only problem was that Chohong did not buy any presents for Hugo. She never thought about buying gifts for him in the first place. "That bastard, I bet he's crying because he misses this Nuna so much." Lulu tilde Lululu tilde Chohong hummed as she made her way down the temple's stairs. Perhaps she was happy to be back after several weeks, or perhaps she was eager to see her comrade's face when he received her gifts, but regardless, her steps quickened. Soon, Chohong reached Carp Diem's office. "Hey, Seol," when she threw the door open and walked in. "Are you here?" "Come out if you are. Big Sis brought you some." Kung, suddenly the building slightly shook. Almost as if there was a small earthquake, the entire building was shaking. Kung, kung. The shaking didn't stop after the first and continued periodically. Chohong's complexion froze stiff. Chapter 102. The Threads of Bonds Coming Together for Kung. Another tiny earthquake swept past Chohong's feet. Judging by its mild intensity, it wasn't anything worth worrying about. However, Chohong's sharp senses noticed that the faint rumblings weren't from the office being struck directly, but rather it being impacted indirectly. This meant that the aftershock of a separate impact force was causing this huge building to shake. What's going on? Chohong looked around hurriedly before peeking her head out of the window. Immediately, Kung! The sound became clearer, and she could even hear other sounds mixed in. Adak. Cho-hong frowned as she covered her ears with her hands. Fuck, is someone blowing up grenades around here? She looked down while grumbling, and her annoyed eyes instantly widened in surprise. Are you okay? She saw a familiar youth cusping his hands together and apologizing, Sial, in front of him. Who are you worried about? I'm fine, so go back to throwing. Was an old man carrying a huge shield, shouting with a husky voice. When Cho-hong saw his familiar navy blue coat, her jaw dropped. He must have heard her approaching as he turned his head slightly to the side. Immediately, his gaze softened. Is that you, Cho-hong? Should I get you some warm tea? No, I'm fine. Then I'll go buy something cool for you to drink. Amen, thanks. No problem. Do you want anything, Cho-hong? An admirable grandson asking with a bright smile and a grandfather replying with a serious face, seeing her comrade who had turned into the old man's errand boy. Cho-hong belatedly replied, Whatever's fine. As soon as Sial Jihu left saying he would be back in a moment, the old man let out a small groan and rubbed his hand. Damn it, that hurt. Cho-hong let out an empty chuckle. You're the one who yelled at him to throw it fast. Give me a break. I heard he was a level 2. Why is he so strong? Just tell him to go easier then. Think about your age. I know more than a few people who left this world trying to act like they were still in their prime. What did you say? Thwack. His cane cleanly struck Cho-hong's head, and she immediately wrapped her hands around it and screamed. Ah, why'd you hit me? I was just worried about you. Worried? That's the tone of someone who's worried. You were ready to make offerings to send me off. Oh, please, making offerings. I already tried that, and it was useless. Hearing Cho-hong's confession, the old man scowled. Right, now that I think about it, that did happen. It was a story from a long time ago. Tired of suffering from the old man's Spartan training method, Cho-hong and Hugo gritted their teeth and scrounged up some money. Not knowing what they were really up to, the old man proudly went. Ho-ho, you two stopped going to bar? You must have finally sobered up. Even tried to buy them better equipment and went with them to an armor shop, but to his surprise, neither Cho-hong nor Hugo had a penny to their name. He tried to find out what happened, and it turned out that they went to the Temple of Luxuria and offered everything to a priest to have a ceremony done. It wasn't long until he found out that they begged for something to happen to the old man. Right, they had actually made offerings to wish him death. You treacherous fools. I was wondering why flower pots kept falling on my head and why I kept tripping. It was all you idiots' fault. When the old man growled, Cho-hong snickered. No, we were tricked too. That dumbass Maria lied with a straight face and said she was a chief priest. Is that something to be proud of? Are you bragging? Huh? I'm kidding. Isn't that obvious? Geez, your high and mighty attitude hasn't gone anywhere, huh? Thwack, thwack, quick tapping sounds rang out. Cho-hong moaned, "Awu," before falling forward and rubbing her head against the couch. Come on, think of how desperate we were. Wouldn't you do the same if you were being beaten day and night? You idiot. If you were half as smart and earnest as Dylan, I wouldn't have needed to work you so hard. Since your bird brain couldn't understand a thing even after I explained it to you 100 times, I had to make your body learn it on its own. But Dylan, Cho-hong shut her mouth abruptly. The old man, pointing his wooden cane at her, also collected his breath and sat back down. While Cho-hong was panting, he gently opened his mouth. I heard what happened. Looks like you've been through a lot. You should have visited earlier. Do you have any idea how much Dylan wanted to see you? Cho-hong retorted in a softer voice. HMPH, you and your mannerless way of talking. The old man replied curtly, then let out a sigh. The aged wrinkles on his face made him look like he lost weight. But well done. It sounds like the parasites came up with a frightening plan, but not only did you save Dylan, you even managed to stop them. You performed outstandingly. I didn't do much. If anything, it's that guy who should be praised. He's the one who did everything. That guy, Sial, you know Sial, the guy you were training before. Speaking of which, what was up with that? I thought you retired. The old man didn't hear what happened in detail, so hearing that the youth did everything came as a surprise. Well, he pleaded desperately, and I found it hard to say no. But I couldn't bear to just watch him, so I figured I'd do it as a pastime until you guys were back. Oh. Is this really the old man who's twisted to his bone marrow? The past you would have turned back without even considering. Ah, what? I can't even say what's on my mind. When the old man raised his wooden cane, Cho-hong backed off with a terrified face. The old man clicked his tongue and looked up at the ceiling. What a hassle. I left in peace knowing I could entrust Carp Diem to Dylan, but now that he's gone, it'll only be a matter of time until Carp Diem disbands. His worries were justified since the leader and nucleus of the team had died. Cho-hong pouted. Don't ignore us, I'm a high ranker now, too. The old man looked as if he just received a culture shock. What? Someone like you, a high ranker? That's right, I'm a Templar now. When Cho-hong strutted her chest proudly, the old man asked again. Really? How? Well, I'm a warrior. I amassed more than enough experience points while I was stuck at level 4, and as for enlightenment. When Cho-hong hesitated to talk about this enlightenment, the old man said tactfully, enlightenment isn't necessary. Plus, weren't you trying to pass expediently using your technical starting class as a priest? Rather than that, what about the mission from the royal family? How is manifestation an expedient method? It's my class ability. Cho-hong protested and continued as if she had just suffered a wrong. As for the mission from the royal family, they wrote it off since I participated in the rescue mission. I risked my life for that mission, so they wouldn't send me off on another one unless they're the worst sons of bitches. To become a high ranker, an earthling had to pass the formality of completing a mission issued by any of the royal families. One thing of note was that this mission was always related to the parasites. Since it boasted a terrifying level of difficulty, there were countless earthlings who were unhappy with it. But that couldn't be helped. After all, just by becoming a level 5, one would gain both the status and the authority needed to spread their voice in paradise. In the first place, the reason the royal families intervened in the earthlings' high-rank promotions was to prevent giving authority and power to those who did not contribute for the betterment of paradise. The 7 gods agreed with the 7 kingdoms as well. Ever since this change happened, the number of new high rankers decreased dramatically. This was because more and more earthlings chose to stay at level 4, realizing the risk needed to overcome the wall blocking their path. In a way, it was quite a depressing reality. It was well known how powerful high rankers truly were. For the royal families who detested the parasites to put such a restriction on their own allies, it could be seen just how deplorable the earthlings were. I see, that makes sense. The old man agreed readily. I'm glad. Since you're now a high ranker, you have the qualifications to take on the mantle of the leader. Me? Leader? No thanks, I can't do something like that. I don't want to either. Cho-hong waved her hand with a scowl. Being a leader of a team wasn't something anyone could do. Not only did you need power, but you also needed the brain to make sound judgments in critical moments. Dylan was an ideal leader from this perspective, but Cho-hong was an idiot who only knew how to fight. This was something the old man knew as well. Right. If you wanted to become a leader, you would have chosen to become a crusader, not a Templar. The old man said regrettably. Anyways, I'm never going to become the leader. I know my personality. If I become the leader, this team is done for. The old man nodded his head in complete agreement, but still spoke with sincerity. There's no other choice. A high ranker needs to be the leader for a team to have any face. Besides, you're at least better than Hugo. Fuck, you're right about that, but why does that make me angry? Seeing Cho-hong's annoyed expression, the old man shook his head side to side. What else can we do? It's not like we can entrust the position of the leader to that level 2 newbie. Cho-hong's complexion sank. Just like the old man said, this problem couldn't be avoided much longer. Setting aside the emptiness left behind by Dylan's death, Carp Diem needed to elect a new leader to elevate the team's dispirited atmosphere. Right, she knew this. But there was just one problem. There's no one suitable for the job. Cho-hong knew her place. Hugo was also out of the question. She saw some potential in Sial, but he was still too inexperienced. Tusk. Cho-hong stole a glance at the old man and smacked her lips. She got up while scratching her neck harshly. I'll consider it. It's not something I should decide alone anyways. The 3 of us will take care of it, so don't mind it. You're already retired, so it shouldn't concern you. Don't be a nagging mother-in-law, okay? The old man chuckled. Cho-hong was curt, but he wasn't so dull as to not notice her true feelings. Color me surprised. What do you mean? Who would have thought that an immature brat like you could learn to be so considerate? Looks like you've tasted Paradise's waters a bit. I'm a high ranker, you know. HMPH, but you're still a halfie. Don't be too full of yourself. Seeing the old man instantly switch from praising to rebuking, Cho-hong dropped her head and sighed. Anyways, don't concern yourself with this problem any further, old man. Just meet everyone you came to meet and go back. Don't go sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. Of course. So when's Hugo getting here? It should be soon. Aren't there other people you have to see? Just Hugo's enough. Hearing this, Cho-hong smacked her chest uncomfortably. Geez, clean up after yourself before you leave. You know what we had to go through after you left. Everyone we met asked, when is the old man coming back, or did he really retire? All right, all right. The old man smiled bitterly as he waved his cane around. Hugo came back to Paradise 5 days later, and during this time, many people visited Carp Diem's office. Without even the slightest bit of exaggeration, almost everyone Seol Jihu met since he came to Haramark came to visit. Maldong, my old friend, starting with someone he never met before. It's been a while, old boy. Cinzia and Agnes came. I hope you've been well, Sir Jang Maldong. Kazuki dropped by. I've wanted to see you, Master Jang. Even Haramark's king, Prihai Hussey, came to visit. As he witnessed the old man's terrifying connections for the past 5 days, he learned a thing or two about this man named Jang Maldong. The first was that he was also from Area 1. The second was that he was incredibly famous even though he wasn't a magician. Finally, he seemed to be the founder of Carp Diem. Of course, that wasn't all. No more worries. It's the start of happy days. Hugo spread his arms out and cheered as he ran. He had been smiling non-stop ever since he returned and found Jang Maldong in the office. Yoo-hoo-hoo-hoo. It's only a matter of time before we return to being Haramark's #1 team. Seeing how confident he was, Seol Jihu approached him like a fish who bit the bait. He must be someone incredible. Yes, incredible doesn't begin to describe him. Could he be a unique ranker? Or perhaps an executor? Hugo's bobbing head stopped. Ooh, no, he's a high ranker. Seol Jihu doubted his ears. He certainly wasn't looking down on level 5 Earthlings, but he couldn't help but be surprised. Don't underestimate him just because of his level. Old man Maldong's worth can't be evaluated with Paradise's system. What do you mean by that? When Seol Jihu asked with glittering eyes, Hugo's lips pursed before he made a troubled expression. It seemed his tiny brain was having trouble coming up with the words to explain the old man. Though quite a bit of time went by, he managed to pull through. Remember how there are 4 classes when you first begin: archer, magician, priest, and warrior. Yes, and no exceptions. But that doesn't mean you have to walk the path of combat. Seol Jihu mulled over Hugo's words before opening his mouth. Now that I think about it, I heard there were people who focused on production. Exactly, but production classes aren't the only non-combat classes. Then what? Hugo became speechless once again. He wrapped his hands around his head, then suddenly yelled, "Ah, Miss Foxy? Kim Hannah?" Seol Jihu also shouted, feeling like he had to play along with Hugo. "Yes, the person who you're contracted to." Hugo spoke excitedly as if he finally thought of a good example. "She's the same. She started out as an archer, but she became a high ranker some other way." What did that mean? Kim Hannah was an archer? You didn't know. Hugo must have thought Seol Jihu would know this as a look of surprise appeared on his face. This is the first time I'm hearing about it. What exactly is that other way? Hugo became silent. Rather than being unable to say his thoughts, he seemed to be choosing his words carefully. To put it in a good way, her abilities are excellent. And if you put it in a bad way, I won't tell anyone else. If you say so. Hugo made Seol Jihu promise 3 times before he finally said it. She's a con artist. Seol Jihu was about to ask why, but he remembered the early parts of his dream and shut his mouth. Hugo let out a dry cough before continuing with his words. Coming back to my point, I think everyone has some sort of talent, but that doesn't mean that their talent has to be battle-oriented. So what you're saying is that if you're skilled at lying or cheating, the gods will develop your talent and guide you in that direction. Exactly. Kim Hanna might be one of the most famous brokers in paradise, but Old Man Jang is indisputably the best trainer in paradise. The daughter of Luxuria is famous in her own right, but she doesn't hold a candle to our old man. Hugo gave a thumbs up. Suddenly, Sial Jihu remembered the old man yelling at him, "You absolute fool, you have such a powerful engine, so why aren't you using it properly? What a waste of mana." Just thinking about it sent shivers down his spine. As someone who had received Jang Maldong's mana training, he couldn't help but agree with Hugo 100%. In truth, Sial Jihu had only spent 5 days training with Jang Maldong. But during these 5 days, not only was he able to evolve his spear throw skill, but he was also able to learn a new ability. What was even more frightening was that he awakened this new ability while training to evolve spear throw to mana spear. Since he even got to raise the proficiency of mana circulation, it was no wonder he was so shocked. All I did was follow his instructions. Having experienced Jang Maldong's magic personally, Sial Jihu fully agreed with Hugo's assessment. That's not all. He has incredible eyes for discerning the talent and nature of people. Oh yeah, just wait a few days. I'm sure he'll find us a skilled archer. He might even train one up himself. Hugo laughed cheerfully before going and clapping his hands. Hey, this is a good opportunity. Why don't you ask the old man to train you too? That was what Sial Jihu wanted too. If he got this far by training under him for 5 days, how strong would he get if he trained under him for a long time? Just thinking about it made him excited. Well, to be honest, the training is going to be so tilde per hard, you might want to kill yourself even. But if you endure his hellish training. Then what? Sial Jihu swallowed hard, his eyes sparkling. Hugo opened his mouth with a serious face. It was then, no. A firm voice cut between the two men. They turned around simultaneously. Hugo, don't tell him useless things and get him excited for nothing. Cho Hong was doing sit-ups on a workout machine but got up to glare at Hugo. What do you mean, useless? Hugo retorted coldly, seemingly bothered by Cho Hong raining on his parade. You don't know? Hey, all I'm saying is that I don't know about Sial, but you're not qualified to ask him for help, just like me and Dylan. Hearing her blunt statement, Hugo flinched and shrunk back. He barely managed to retire after leaving behind his lingering attachments. You want to stop him because of your greed? You don't have to put it like that. Let's just send him off quietly and be happy he's coming to see us from time to time. You know how easily he gets attached to people. If you cling to him desperately, he's going to hesitate for sure. But look at the situation we're in. Hugo tried to argue until the end. Keep your promise. But Cho Hong gave him her unique, chilly glare and Hugo froze up on the spot. You want to see him be disappointed again? Her sharp voice caused Hugo to grimace. He gritted his teeth and glared back at Cho Hong before growling like a tiger and leaving. The heated mood flushed cold in an instant. Caught between a rock and a hard place, Sial Jihu stealthily walked toward Cho Hong, who snorted and went back to working out. I told you no, okay? But before he could even ask, Cho Hong warned him. Feeling a bit guilty, he pouted his lower lip. I didn't say anything. It's pretty obvious what you were trying to say. Cho Hong raised her upper body with a grunt. After watching her toned abs for a moment, he raised his finger and poked her belly button. Ah, that tickles. Stop, are you a pervert? Cho Hong. You can act cute all you want, but I won't change my mind. Sial Jihu's shoulders dropped. There was no hesitation in Cho Hong's voice. It was clear she already made up her mind. But why not? She didn't answer immediately. She simply continued working out in silence. Soon, she stepped down from the workout machine and put a towel over her shoulder. She didn't open her mouth until she turned halfway back to grab her water bottle. Old Man Maldong, he's the oldest earthling in paradise, not necessarily by age, but by how long he's been here. How long? Even I'm not sure, Cho Hong muttered as she twisted the water bottle open. But I do know he's been here longer than anybody else I know. I think he's one of the first people to have entered paradise. Oh, surprising, right? You see, working in paradise for over 10 years isn't easy. Gulp, gulp, puha! She emptied half of the bottle in one shot before continuing. Unless you're attached to this world in some way, it's impossible to last that long. Sial Jihu nodded his head. Really, no matter how much I think about it, he's one hell of an old man. He entered paradise at his old age and scraped up his talent as a trainer to aid paradise. Who could hate him? If it were up to me, I'd give him a long, standing ovation. But after that, Chohong blurred her speech. But you know, not all people are as noble and amazing as old man Maldong. She sounded like she was prompting him to agree. But rather than nodding his head or verbally agreeing, he chose to ask a question. What did you mean when you were talking about him being disappointed? Chohong paused. Then she immediately wiped her face with the towel, almost like she was trying to cover her face. When paradise first opened, I heard things weren't like this. Things weren't like this. Sial Jihu had an idea what this meant. Apparently, it was a time full of hope, with Earthlings sincerely working to help paradise and paradisians working to support Earthlings as much as they can. Right, there definitely was a time like that. A time when Earthlings and paradisians weren't trying to bite each other's heads off in secret. But it's not like that anymore. Things changed and many things happened. And, well, it must have been shocking for him. Sial Jihu wanted to ask what happened but reined in his curiosity. He could tell Chohong didn't want to talk about it. However, Chohong seemed to have felt his curious gaze as she muttered after hesitating for a long time. Just imagine it. You giving your time and effort to raise disciples, all so that they can aid paradise in some way, but instead they fight and kill each other all in the name of profit. Some of them even join hands to cause a revolt, causing countless paradisians to die in the process. He suddenly remembered the internal conflict and war that happened in Haramark. How would you feel if that happened to you? Think about it. Chohong left those words behind and left the training ground. However, Sial Jihu wasn't able to move for a long time. He suddenly thought the old man was similar to Alfred Nobel. Although Nobel became famous for inventing the dynamite, he saw his invention being used to take the lives of millions and regretted it. Although the circumstances were different, old man Jiang Maldong must have felt something similar. Once his thoughts reached here, Sial Jihu raised his arms. When he concentrated on bringing out his mana, blue energy began to gather on his hands. Weeing, the progress he made in the past few days was simply too incredible. He had already learned the level 3 skill, Aura, which was the materialization of his mana. But now that he knew the old man's history, he couldn't bring himself to pester him any further. It's regrettable, but I guess this is it. He managed to overcome the wall. Although he was told he still had a long ways to go, he was satisfied with the results. At the very least, he had kept the promise he made to himself. After making the energy dissipate, Sial Jihu turned around to head to the temple. He was hoping he could fully unlock his 9 eyes. Chapter 103. The threads of bonds coming together 5. Well done. Gyula spoke in a rare, upbeat voice. Not only did you stop the parasites' plan, but you also dealt their forces a considerable blow. Even the parasite queen should have no choice but to falter because of that. It sounded like she was praising him. To confirm this, Sial Jihu bowed down and immediately felt a gentle touch stroking his hair. Was it because it was the hand of a goddess? He liked how warm it was. Well done. You earned us a lot of time. Yes, this event will serve as a sturdy breakwater for when you fully jump into the flow of fate in the future. He was happy to be praised, but not so much with her riddles. Goddess Gyula, I may sound impertinent, but can you be a bit more straightforward? What do you mean straightforward? You always seem to say things in a roundabout way. For example, the 5 WTKs, who, what, when, where, why. If you could at least explain things this way, won't it be easier for both of us? His bold question stopped Gyula's hand, and Sial Jihu felt a tapping on his head. Almost as if Gyula was contemplating, what should I do with this child? Didn't I tell you before? Revealing profound secrets would greatly affect the law of causality. Is it that important to not affect the law of causality? Of course it is. You can bring about a desired effect by interfering with the cause. But the law of causality is always impartial. The gentle and consoling voice continued. Even if you can make the scale tip on one side, the law of causality will always balance it back. You mean to say if you affect the cause to bring about a favorable effect, the other side will be given a similar cause and effect? That's right. And if we are not careful, it might nullify everything we have done until now. Then I guess I can't pester you about that. Sial Jihu acquiesced quietly. Gyula must have felt bad seeing his dejected look. Her voice rang out. It's not that I don't have things I want to say. Thankfully, there are some possibilities ahead of us, so for the time being, be patient and focus on your growth. Worrying too much about this now would be the same as putting the cart before the horse. Sial Jihu's ears perked up after hearing that there was a method to avoid the balancing effect of the law of causality. However, he didn't press for an explanation any further than he needed. Gyula's serious tone made him feel that he shouldn't investigate the matter any further. Although his curiosity hadn't been satisfied, he decided to move along and finish what he came to do. The situation with his level was exactly as he expected it to be. By participating in the rescue mission, he had amassed quite a bit of experience and merit. His indirect involvement in the destruction of the laboratory and his subsequent survival against all odds gave him a large amount of contribution points. It was so much that, in the name of Gyula, I shall henceforth bestow Sial Jihu the title of Level 3 Mana Lancer. I expect great feats befitting the one-of-a-kind class from you. He had experience points left over after he leveled up. What? Sial Jihu quickly raised his head, his excitement disappearing as a look of horror appeared on his face. What's wrong? The class name. It's Mana Lancer. Sial Jihu's jaw dropped at Gyula's firm answer, and then he quickly became depressed. After hesitating for a moment, he opened his eyes and muttered in his head, "That's too harsh. What the heck is a Mana Lancer? What do you mean, don't you have cooler class names?" "I'm embarrassed to tell people my class name, you little brat." Sial Jihu felt more strength entering the hand stroking his head. He quickly asked before he got smacked. "Gyulanim, there's something I want to ask. Speak. Would it be possible for you to awaken just one of the colors of the right side? Not even remotely possible." Just as he expected, Gyula refused flatly. Sial Jihu was rubbing his hands together with a pleading smile, but as soon as he heard Gyula's answer, his expression turned cold. "Don't even dream about it. The three colors of the right side are tied together and need to be awakened simultaneously. As I told you the last time, this takes a large amount of contribution points." Hearing this reply, Sial Jihu grumbled inwardly, "You're a goddess, so do you have to be so stingy? At the very least, can't you change my class name? Your naming sense sucks," he complained in all possible ways, impertinent thwack. In the end, Gyula smacked him. Sial Jihu rubbed his steaming head and snorted, "Wait and see." He remembered hearing that Luxuria, the goddess of lust, was like a kind older sister who would give you a warm embrace. Furthermore, her voice was said to be sensual. Sial Jihu vowed to start going to Luxuria's temple henceforth instead of going here. Phew. While Gyula sighed like she was disappointed, Sial Jihu confirmed the new abilities he could awaken. Mana Spear could evolve into Mana Spear Multiple, but he passed on it for now since he planned to learn this himself. There was also the Aura, which amplified the cutting power and the destructive power of his spear. When he thought about how he learned this skill under Jang Maldong's training, a dumbfounded laugh escaped his mouth. Aura was a skill that could be learned at level 3 and was extremely difficult to learn at level 2. Old man Maldong was only trying to help him learn how to materialize his mana. But one thing Jang Maldong had overlooked was Sial Jihu's abnormally high mana stat, which easily contended with the high rankers. He was able to learn Aura quickly with the help of mana circulation, which boasted a higher proficiency rank compared to his level, and the effect of Saikai's tears. The old man's face at the time was quite a sight to behold. In any case, the remaining skill was the flash step, which sounded vaguely familiar, some sort of a movement technique. He felt like he'd seen it before in martial arts novels, but that was it. A worried look appeared on his face. He was obviously thinking, just how the heck am I supposed to learn this? I see that you're worried. No, it's just... Sial Jihu shook his head, but upon realizing that Gyula could read his mind, he laughed feebly. Fufu, you are worried over nothing. Worried over nothing. You don't have to worry about what is to come. That is, as long as you don't choose to run away or do nothing. After all, you've been weaving the threads of bonds one by one. Ah, here she goes again with her enigmatic riddles. The threads tied to you are trying to bind new bonds. So just be patient and wait. He had no clue what she meant by threads or bonds. He also didn't like the word bind, since it sounded like he was forcing people. But the message as a whole seemed to be a good one. Sial Jihu nodded his head. He knew that talking back would only end up with him getting smacked. More importantly, his mind was currently filled with thoughts about Flash Step. Jang Maldong must have been exhausted as he lay sprawled on the couch. He had already met everyone he needed to and wanted to head back. But people kept visiting him non-stop. It wasn't that he disliked it. In fact, he was rather grateful that they remembered him. But even good things needed to be in moderation. Plus, there were more than a few people who were expecting him to come out of retirement and return to paradise. Also, it was a chore to have deep conversations, and that wasn't all. If there was one topic he heard more than his retirement, it was the newbie. Everyone who visited him brought up the newbie, so much so that he was starting to get annoyed. But then again, his interest was piqued. Wait, what was that guy's name again? Ah, no, he didn't finish his thought. He was retired. He didn't want to involve himself any further. I'll need to go back soon, if I stay any longer than this. Jang Maldong picked up his tie and coat before anyone else could come to bother him. But the heavens weren't so kind. Knock, knock. Before he could even put on his tie, knocks rang out on the door. Jang Maldong let out a groan before plopping down on the couch and pressing his temples. Come in, the door is open. The door opened. Who was it this time? Jang Maldong narrowed his eyes and turned to the door, only to be surprised. Is anyone here? An old voice rang out. The visitor looked just as old as Jang Maldong. The important thing was that he was someone Jang Maldong had never seen before. The old visitor looked at Jang Maldong and asked quietly, Excuse me, is there an earthling named Sial here? Right, it was Sial. Wait, earthling. People from Earth rarely referred to themselves as earthlings. In the first place, the word was coined to distinguish between earthlings and paradisians, so it was often used by paradisians. He seems to be out. Ah, come in. I see. Excuse me then, I'll be troubling you for a bit. The old visitor walked in and sat down on the couch across from Jang Maldong. Because the old visitor seemed to be the same age as him, Jang Maldong spoke politely. Would you like to drink some tea while you wait? The old visitor did the same. No, I'm fine. Plus, I am not an earthling. Does it matter whether you are an earthling or a paradisian? Ha ha. Jang Maldong chuckled before brewing 2 cups of tea and handing one to the old visitor. Tea, thank you. No problem. That's a traditional Korean tea made from tea leaves found on Earth. It's sweet even though it doesn't have any sugar in it. The old visitor carefully took a sip before nodding his head. It tastes wonderful. I'm happy that you like it. If you'd like, I can bring some for you to take back home. Seeing Jang Maldong roar with laughter, the old visitor was slightly taken aback. It seemed like he didn't know what to make of the unexpected treatment. After taking a few more sips, Jang Maldong finally asked what he was wondering. Pardon me, but who might you be? Why are you trying to find that young man? He asked politely. As the old visitor was used to being treated as an NPC, he couldn't help but see Jang Maldong in a different light. He quickly fixed his posture to look like a gentleman before finally opening his mouth. I'm the village head of Ramen Village. I came to thank him on behalf of the village. Excuse me? Jang Maldong was taken by surprise at the old visitor's unexpected reason for stopping by. It was then, kick, the door creaked open. 2 pairs of eyes turned to the side simultaneously and found a young man walking in dejectedly. Huh. Sialjihu must have seen the village head as he let out a surprised voice. Village head? Only then did the village head reveal a gentle smile. It's been a while. Sialjihu and the village head conversed cordially for a long time. The atmosphere was quite decent, which was to be expected, given how much help they had given each other. After being relegated to a spectator, Jang Maldong carefully listened to their conversation. You must be a fool, telling the king to use the gold bar you earned for our village. Do you know how surprised I was hearing that? What? Jang Maldong was listening with his chin on his hand when he heard what the village head said and raised his head. He earned what and used it how? I remembered you saying that you wanted to move to the city. I don't really like carrying debts on my shoulders, you see. That's quite the way of paying back your debts. How did you manage to convince the king? I doubt he agreed easily. He was troubled at first, so I had to tell him about your invaluable contribution on making the rescue mission a success. I also made sure to explain your circumstances, so you won't have to worry about being bothered by him. Please. He already came to see me personally and indirectly asked if I would lend the royal family a hand. Who? Well, don't worry about it too much. He said he wouldn't mention my past, and I told him that I'd think about it. Despite what he was saying, the village head seemed happy that the king personally came to recruit him. At that moment, Seol Jihu was suddenly reminded of Gyula's words about binding others with bonds, but he quickly forgot about it and congratulated the old man. The village head let out a dry cough. That was when he saw Jang Maldong sitting there in a daze and went, "Ah." He realized he had gotten swept away by the atmosphere and ended up talking too much. "Ah, he is." When Seol Jihu tried to introduce him, Jang Maldong opened his mouth. "I'm Jang Maldong, an insignificant villager." Jang Maldong? The village head showed signs of being startled. "Could you be Haramark's famous martial arts master? It's a false reputation." The village head shook his head. "False reputation? I see that you're humble." Even among Paradisians, there are few who have not heard of the name Jang Maldong. After saying that, the village head held out his hand. "This insignificant villager is named Arbor Muto. May I have the honor?" "I'm embarrassed to take your hand." "Don't be. I know full well just how much you've done for Paradise until now. Since even the head of a remote village knows about you, what more is there to say?" Once the village head put it that way, Jang Maldong found it harder to refuse. Seol Jihu watched the two old men shake hands and smiled in awe. Old man Maldong really is amazing. After shaking hands, the village head, no Arbor Muto, got up. Jang Maldong followed him in a hurry. "Why don't you stay a little longer?" "It's fine. You see, the entire village has been quite busy preparing for the migration." Jang Maldong couldn't say much once he heard this. Arbor Muto looked back and forth between Jang Maldong and Seol Jihu before smiling happily. "I was thinking that this man was different. It seems it's all thanks to you. It is normal for a courageous master to nurture a courageous disciple." "And no. Then I must thank you as well. You helped save the lives of hundreds of villagers." Jang Maldong was flustered. This old man in front of him seemed to be mistaken about something. However, Arbor Muto continued unfazed. "You have an excellent disciple. I'm envious." At that moment, Jang Maldong's eyes opened wide. He looked dazed as if he had just been struck in the head with a hammer. "I'll see you off." "Please don't. I'll be uncomfortable if you do." Arbor Muto walked towards the door before suddenly stopping. There's actually one thing I forgot to mention. Well, it's more of a request. Please go ahead." Arbor Muto rummaged through his pockets before taking out a folded piece of paper. "Have you heard of Big Boulder Stone Mountain?" Seol Jihu tilted his head. He had no clue, but this was a place Jang Maldong was familiar with. After all, this was where countless memories from when he was in his prime were buried. Then again, it was a place of nightmares for Chohong and Hugo. Seol Jihu took the folded paper and asked, "What's this?" "It's a map to my hideout in that mountain." "Pardon? What's there to be so surprised of?" "Just how many hideouts do you have?" Arbor Muto paused for a moment before replying. 22. The smart ones are always digging tunnels to escape for when they need to." After snickering like a child, he continued, "Anyways, it's close to Haramark. It will only take a day by carriage." "What do you want me to do?" "Nothing much. There should be a few worn-down equipment and books lying around. All you have to do is bring them to me." "That sounds easy." "It should be. But I recommend you to be careful. It's been a while since anyone's visited that place, and because I built the hideout in a cave, I don't know what might be dwelling in it now." "Yes, I understand." Seol Jihu nodded his head slowly. "When do you need them?" "You can take your time." "As you know, I've been a bit busy lately. You can go when you're bored and want a fresh breath of air." "So it looks like I have time." Sial Jihu smiled brightly. Also, Arbor Muto made a furtive smile. I plan on paying with what's inside the hideout. Is that okay? With what's inside the hideout? Yes, there should be items and potions inside. They're nothing great, so I understand if you'd rather take money. No, that's fine with me. Sial Jihu agreed immediately, remembering that the village head was a distinguished mage back in the day. Anyways, you can go when you have time. With that, Arbor Muto left the office. What kind of person is he? Jang Maldong finally snapped out of his daze and asked as soon as the door closed shut. Sial Jihu hesitated as if he found it difficult to answer him. He doesn't seem like the kind of man who belongs in a remote village. How did you know? He didn't look simple, and I could easily figure it out from your conversation. If the king personally made him an offer, he shouldn't be an ordinary old man. Ah, that's true. It's fine. I can keep secrets. Sial Jihu scratched his cheek and opened his mouth like he didn't have a choice. He went into seclusion, but he was once a famous mage in the Delphinian Duchy. Delphinian Duchy, Jang Maldong exclaimed in surprise. A mage from the Empire. He's an even bigger man than I imagined. The Empire? But he's from the Delphinian Duchy. Delphinian Duchy was one of the duchies under the Duke families of the Empire. Having heard this for the first time, Sial Jihu's eyes widened. But that old man sure likes to go about things in a roundabout way. He could have just told you straight out. Instead, he makes it a request. Jang Maldong snickered before suddenly raising his arm with a gentle face and placing his hand on the youth's shoulder. Thank you. Tap, tap. He tapped his shoulders a couple of times and smiled. This was the first smile Sial Jihu was seeing. Despite saying he would leave as soon as possible, Jang Maldong stayed for another day under the pretext he would see Chohong and Hugo one more time. Of course, his real reason was something else. He couldn't get his meeting with Arbor Muto out of his mind. He couldn't forget the words that were said to him. A refreshing feeling constantly surged inside him, not wanting to disappear. He had been full of complaints, but now he wanted to stay in paradise. Of course, staying in paradise came with the risk of having to meet someone, and Jang Maldong's intuition was spot on. Maldong, Ian came to visit him once more. Jang Maldong showed clear hints of being tired, but after being convinced by Ian's words that this might be the last chance for them to drink together, he headed to eat, drink, and enjoy. I thought you would have already left by now. I'm surprised. I'm leaving soon. Come on, do you really have to? Of course, I won't really be welcomed if I stayed anyway. Ha, who in paradise won't welcome you? Who? Ian spat out a mouthful of saliva as he protested strongly. Think about it, friend, HM. Haramark still needs you. In truth, Ian Denzel was one of the people Jang Maldong was most uncomfortable around. That was because Ian was one of his closest friends who earnestly wished for his return. Phew! Seeing Jang Maldong staying silent, Ian heaved out a deep sigh. He must have drunk quite a lot as the smell of alcohol oozed out of his mouth. Roger, Garp, Sengoku, there aren't many left who know the old paradise. It's been dozens of years, it's obvious. Jang Maldong was nodding his head in agreement when, What, Ro who? He furrowed his brows and asked back. Ian dropped his head before breaking out into an uncontrollable laughter. Shame? What a shame. I was hoping you'd bitterly agree with what I said. Jang Maldong clicked his tongue with a dumbfounded look. I see that you haven't lost your habit of spouting nonsense. You still watch those animations. Of course I do. You should see them too. Anime is fun. At my age, even you should watch in moderation. I won't nag you about watching them, but isn't it embarrassing to spout nonsense like that? Advice from a friend? Fine, I won't see it from now on. Tack. Ian smacked the table, his eyes flickering with light. So you should come back. Jang Maldong put on a tired expression at Ian's jump in logic. You sure are persistent, I'll give you that. Don't you get tired. Do you know why I'm not giving up and pestering you until the end? His question was met with another question. I don't. It's because I know you have regrets. Jang Maldong was about to empty a glass when he paused and looked at Ian solemnly. The Jang Maldong I know is sure about tying and cutting off connections, but your visits from time to time means that you still have lingering feelings here. Ian emphasized his point. Jiang Maldong slowly put his glass down. What do you know? I doubt there's anyone in paradise who knows you better than me. Not helping the Beastmen alliance, the revolts and internal conflicts, the countless paradisians who died as a result. I don't think any of that is your fault. You're right, Jiang Maldong agreed readily. But I believe, at the very least, I played a role in them. I shouldn't have given them power so easily. His voice was full of regret. How humans change once they obtain power. I've never been so regretful of my profession in my life. If that's what you really think, then I won't stop you. Ian shrugged his shoulders. But the Jiang Maldong I know isn't someone who would forget about his mistake and abandon it. No, he's the type to fix it and make up for it. Let's stop talking about this. Jiang Maldong revealed his discomfort. There's no reason for me to stay in paradise. No. However, Ian didn't stop. There is, you still have a dream to achieve. It's an unachievable dream. Jiang Maldong remarked bitterly. It's too late. Paradise is already. No, you're wrong. Ian refuted him before he could even finish his thought. I think life is like the 4 seasons. When spring passes, summer comes. When summer leaves, autumn comes knocking, and when autumn departs, winter enters. Enough with the ambiguous riddles. If there's something you want to say it clearly. It's Sial. Ian brought up his main point. What about him? I think the change has already begun. You make it sound like he will return paradise to what it used to be. I'm not lying. I know it will happen, and I'm looking forward to it. Jiang Maldong could tell from Ian's eyes that he was completely serious. He could feel that each word he spoke had a weight behind it. Every time we think it can't be done, every time we think it's impossible, Sial made it come true. When I heard he had returned from the rescue mission alive, I was convinced. He might have been lucky the first couple of times, but not the third time. Sial has a special power. Jiang Maldong closed his eyes. A long sigh escaped his mouth. That guy, I know that he's special. I acknowledge that he's good. But Jiang Maldong hesitated, then twisted his lips. But you never know. Who knows if he will change in the future like the rest of them? That's why he needs you. Ian spoke as if he'd been waiting for this exact moment. Sial needs someone to guide him, someone to keep him on the right track. He blurted out as if he was tired of having to say such obvious things. Jiang Maldong didn't say anything. He only fiddled with his glass of alcohol. From the outside, he looked like he was thinking about something. Ian tilted his own glass, even though his face was flushed red. Maldong. His tongue slurred, but the words he spoke were clear. In the 4 seasons of life, spring won't come just by waiting. You have to endure the bitter cold and struggle to break through the frozen earth. Only then can you see the light of day and welcome spring. I'm not telling you to do anything. I'm not telling you to return to the front lines. Both you and I already failed once, and we've aged, after saying that. But if you still hold onto the dream we once held. He continued with sincerity and earnestness that wasn't present before. Then at least put out your last chips. Like a final hurrah, bet on the card that can turn the tide of Kung. Ian slurred the last bits of speech before his head slammed the table. For the next few moments, a long silence ensued. Jiang Maldong listened to Ian's inebriated mumblings, then smiled bitterly. Easy to say, damned guy. He raised the glass in his hand and poured it into his mouth. It wasn't until late at night that Jiang Maldong left the pub. After telling the owner to throw Ian somewhere on the side of the road, he headed back to Carp Diem's office. Perhaps because he was drunk, his feet staggered from side to side. Jiang Maldong's steps halted in front of the office door. Now that he thought about it, he didn't have a reason to go in. He just had to turn back and leave paradise. Then everything would be over. After hesitating for some time, Jiang Maldong took a peek inside. Ho! Then he subconsciously exclaimed in awe. On the first floor, a young man was training arduously. Even though it was late, he just as hardworking as the first day he saw him. Looking at him, several statements flashed in his mind. Can you believe it? He consoled a soul. A soul? That was hilarious. He stood there and said, if you want to take it, do it over my dead body. God, I still remember it clearly. He's an idiot. Do you know why he volunteered to be the bait during the Battle of Arden Fortress? He said he didn't want any harm to come to the Royal Army. He's a bit of a unique earthling. How should I say this? Well, you can tell just from the way he's uncomfortable around me, the king. It doesn't look like he's treating paradise as a game. Teresa fell for him, which says everything. Most importantly, you have an excellent disciple. The words Muto said to him made him tremble. He had heard the same words multiple times for the countless earthlings he trained. However, this was the first time he received this feeling. After all, even the same words could hold different meanings. The more he thought about it, a tight thread seemed to be binding his leg, telling him to stay. I know you still have regrets, Jiang Maldong sighed. I didn't have regrets. They just appeared now, you bastard. After murmuring to himself, he stared at the young man with complicated eyes. If only he was a genius. From what he could gather during the short time he trained him, the young man's physical body was incredible for his level. However, his talents were strictly average. He wasn't the type to surprise anyone if left alone, but he wasn't the type to disappoint anyone either. If he wasn't exactly the way he was, he would have been able to leave without hesitation. That's what was regrettable. If he could teach him this, if he could teach him that. In other words, he could do it if he just knew how. Why did he have to appear now of all times? Jiang Maldong pressed his fedora down. Then he slowly walked forward. Xiao Jihu was happy. That was because Agnes had just contacted him, telling him she would come to visit soon. Although she said she might be late, he knew Agnes kept her promises. Excited to ask her about Flash Step the moment she came, he trained by himself while waiting. It was then. Ho! Xiao Jihu turned around hearing the door open. He then blinked his eyes in surprise. Elder Jiang Maldong? You said your name was Xiao. Putting aside the fact that Jiang Maldong came in without an announcement, Xiao was more surprised that he called him by his name for the first time. There's something I want to ask you. Curious about his sudden statement, he calmly came down from the workout machine. What's the reason you come to paradise? Xiao Jihu's face contorted. He couldn't determine the intent behind the question. He smelled a hint of alcohol coming from him. His gentle eyes seemed to be burning with invisible flames. I want to know why you come to paradise. Feeling that something wasn't right, Xiao Jihu carefully reflected on the question before opening his mouth. Because I like this place. No, not something abstract like that, the old man asked again. Be more concrete. Money and fame, benefits or freedom, things like that. Xiao Jihu shook his head. It's nothing like that. It's not, the old man asked sharply. You don't like money and fame? No, it's not that I hate them. In the first place, I don't think there's anything wrong with liking them. That's true, but I'm not coming to paradise because of them. Then why? Because this is the place I belong. Xiao Jihu scratched his cheek. It's also the place that gave me a fresh start. He made a troubled expression before smiling. I really can't think of anything to say other than that I like it here. The old man kept his eyes fixed on him the whole time. As if to not miss even the slightest twitch of his facial muscles, he examined every fiber of his hair and reflected on every single word he spoke. After a brief moment of silence, the old man began to talk once more. Then, you will be sad if paradise disappears. Oh, of course. Xiao Jihu replied in a fluster. Paradise disappearing? He'd finally found his place to be. He didn't even want to imagine such a thing. In fact, he didn't know why he was asking such a thing in the first place. So when he gave the old man a confused glance, his fierce expression softened. Is that true? His hoarse voice mellowed as well. Yes. Xiao Jihu tilted his head and replied clearly. But why are you asking me that? Although he asked this question, the old man didn't respond. His wooden cane, which had been constantly tapping the ground, finally stopped. Damned brat, he suddenly cursed. 10 years, no, if only you came 5 years earlier. He even gritted his teeth. Appearing now of all times? He bit his lips before turning back and stomping out. Did I do something wrong? As if he was struck by a bolt of lightning under a clear sky, Xiao Jihu pouted his lower lip. Jiang Maldong walked down to the basement and opened the iron cabinet. The closet was full of clothes he used to wear in the past. With thirsty eyes, he roughly took off his coat. He proceeded to take off his shirt and pants before changing into his training clothes. When he saw himself in the mirror, a refreshed feeling surged inside him. Soon, carrying his wooden stick, Jang Maldong made his way up the stairs. The creator of legends, Paradise's kingmaker, had finally returned. Chapter 104. The village head's gift. A clear, bright morning dawned in Paradise. The sky was serene and blue, like a cool seaside that presented a refreshing feeling to anyone who saw it. However, Carp Diem's office was bustling with Jang Maldong's bombshell announcement. "You're staying." When Cho Hong shot up in shock, Jang Maldong frowned. "I haven't gone deaf, so stop yelling." Cho Hong looked left and right in utter disbelief. Hugo was busy cheering and dancing around the room, and it didn't look like he was the one responsible. But it was hard to believe that Xiao Jihu convinced him. After all, Jang Maldong was more stubborn than a mule. In the end, she could only conclude that he changed his mind on his own. "Are you serious?" Seeing Cho Hong's complicated gaze, Jang Maldong tapped the floor with his wooden cane. "I'm not saying I'm coming out of retirement. It's just... I'm the one who created Carp Diem and have been with it through thick and thin. If I leave it alone, it will either get disbanded or get absorbed. It didn't sit well with me to let that happen." "Geez, old man, you're worrying about it too much. Didn't I say we'd take care of it?" "Take care of it." Jang Maldong laughed out loud. "Even if your mouth is twisted, you need to speak properly. You are actually saying that when you said you can't handle being the leader." "Hurrah!" Hugo raised his arms and cheered. "Shut it, what are you so proud of?" Thwack, Jang Maldong's cane struck his head mercilessly. But that was seemingly not enough to calm Hugo as he continued giggling while rolling around on the floor screaming. Then, Cho Hong spoke. "What are you saying you'll do?" "For the moment, I'll stay on as the team advisor." After smacking his lips, Jang Maldong looked back and forth between Cho Hong and Hugo and sighed. "It would have been a different story if I wasn't aware of Carp Diem's current state, but now that I am, I can't just sit by and watch it fall to ruin. I'll be here at least until you find a new archer." "Ah, stop. We're not going to fall to ruin." "I can see that happening as clear as day, you brat." In truth, Jang Maldong's temporary return should be something to celebrate given Carp Diem's current situation. His long experience would definitely keep the team well balanced. Cho Hong's eyes rolled and she slumped down on the couch. She could tell the old man had made up his mind by the way he had switched out of his suit and changed into his training clothes. "Whatever, do what you want." "Good, I will." "HMPH, you'll regret it for sure." "For the record, I did tell you to go back." "Shut it. Now that we're talking about this, let's get something straight. Didn't I tell you to learn about reading the state of affairs? What's the point in becoming a high ranker? All you're good at is fighting." Yeah. Cho Hong waved her hands fiercely. Jang Maldong stopped talking, but it was too late. Xiao Jihu and Hugo were looking at her with widened eyes. "Really? You're a high ranker now?" Why did you tell them? I was going to surprise them." Hearing Xiao Jihu's question, Cho Hong threw a temper tantrum. Jang Maldong snorted without batting an eye. "What's there to be surprised about anyways?" "Ehu." Cho Hong scratched her head, then shot a boasting smirk at Hugo. "See, I told you I was going to get there first." She then turned to Xiao Jihu and made a peace sign with her fingers. "I'm a high ranker now." "Woa!" Xiao Jihu ran forward excitedly, and the duo rejoiced while dancing to the tune of Libertango. Animated by the lively atmosphere, Hugo began to dance as well. "So, what did you go with?" "Templar." Xiao Jihu drew a deep breath. Templar, it just sounded too cool. His eyes shone with admiration, especially when he thought of his own half-assed class name. Seeing him be so openly jealous, Cho Hong rubbed his nose in satisfaction. She then remembered the saying, "Happiness multiplies when shared," and remembered the gift she had brought. "Wait here." Cho Hong went and found the shopping bags that had been sitting in the corner of the office since she returned. Then she cleared her throat with a cough. "Kyuhum, I generously brought you a gift." "Really?" Xiao Jihu's eyes widened. Hugo then peeked his head, asking, "What about me?" But both Cho Hong and Xiao Jihu were too absorbed in their own world to pay attention to him. "Yep, knowing how much you like training, What a coincidence, I have a gift for you too." "HM? Wait here." With a sweet grin, Xiao Jihu hopped to his bedroom. When Cho Hong saw what he returned with, she only stood there and blinked her eyes dazedly. "Here, it's a gift for becoming a high ranker." "Congrats." Cho-hong stared at the iron mace tinged with black as if she was entranced. The large iron ball hanging on the tip and the sharp thorn-like spikes gave the weapon an intimidating aura. It's called the Thorn of Steel. It's apparently made out of a meteorite. Ho! A meteorite? Even Jang Maldong was impressed. It even has 2 enchantments on it that doubles its power. It sounded like he was selling an insurance plan or something, but Cho-hong was too busy gawking at the terrifying beauty of the mace to notice. How is it? You like it? She loved it. There was no way she could possibly not like it. Rising to level 5 was difficult, but just getting there wasn't enough. One had to obtain equipment worthy of their level to truly call themselves a high ranker. The problem was that the cost of the equipment shot up dramatically from level 5. Most people couldn't even dream about changing out all of their equipment, as they could only afford 1 or 2 with the money they had saved up. The money Cho-hong had saved was barely enough to change out her weapon, but this +2 Thorn of Steel was a true weapon worthy of a high ranker. Thanks to this, she could invest her money in her armor. Ho, how? The shock she received must have been great, as even her voice was trembling. I was invited to the royal palace when I came back. They told me I could take whatever I wanted, so I brought that one. Hugo appealed his existence, going, Me, what about me? But ignoring him completely, Cho-hong looked at the gift surpassing her imaginations and stood at a loss for what to do. What? Why you should have brought something for yourself? How could you use that precious opportunity for me? Even though such words were coming out of her mouth, her body was honest. The corners of her mouth were twitching up repeatedly. It's fine. Tell them you want to switch it out for something else. She even said something she didn't mean. I chose it because I wanted to. I'd never do that. But, don't be like that. Here, be a good Cho-hong, okay? Here. Stop. Stop, Tilda. When Seol Jihu tried to push the mace into her hands, she took a small step back and twisted her body side to side. Then, when she pretended to give in and finally took it, her body shuddered as if it had just been electrified. How can it fit into my hands so perfectly? The Thorn of Steel's temptation was simply too great. Once she grabbed it, she didn't want to ever let go. In her ecstasy, she even began to delude herself into thinking that the weapon was crafted just for her. Tilda Cho-hong moaned in a daze, then quickly snapped back to reality. A youth with a blush on his face was looking at her with anticipation. Her complexion slightly paled. So what gift did you get me? Looking at his smiling face, she couldn't bring herself to not give it to him, but when she compared her present to the mace, that wasn't all. Cho-hong spotted the sandbags tied around his wrists, and her eyes swayed like a stream of water. What, Tilda, don't tease me and show me. Wait. Cho-hong subconsciously hid the bag behind her back. She then stepped backward bit by bit. Tilting his head, Seol Jihu activated Festina earring and quickly ran behind her. At the same time, he snatched the bag from her hand and looked inside. Cho-hong frowned belatedly and restlessly bit her lower lip. Jang Maldong had never seen her trembling so much, so even he couldn't help but wonder what she had brought. The gift Cho-hong had gotten him were sandbags. She immediately dropped her head. I thought they'd help you with your training. She would have given them earlier if she knew. The gift exchange had just happened at an awkward time. Although she pondered for hours about what to get him, she was too ashamed to say anything. She felt like she was walking on eggshells. Oh, this is great. I was just thinking that I brought too little. However, Seol Jihu looked sincerely happy. Not a hint of disappointment could be seen on his face. Cho-hong muttered with a sullen face. Don't lie. I know you brought 4 of them. Not just 4 of them, only 4 of them. Plus, they were super cheap, so I could barely feel a thing after putting them on each of my limbs. Now I can have 2 on each. Seol Jihu held the paper bag in his embrace. Because it had been so long since he last received a gift, just the fact that he got a gift made him happy. And seeing how genuinely happy he was, Cho-hong brightened up. Really? Yep, thanks. I'll wear these when I train from now on. His embarrassing yet sincere expression flew right at her. The bridge of Cho-hong's nose became flushed red. Do what you want. Jang Maldong snorted and turned his head. He looked at Cho-hong, who was looking at her mace and grinning from ear to ear with a look of surprise. He always thought of her as a tomboy, so he couldn't get used to her unexpectedly prim side. On the other hand, he made a faint smile as he watched the grinning youth. As someone who had been helping him train, he knew very well that Sial Jihu had brought 8 sandbags with him rather than 4. Little brat. As he was nodding his head in approval, he suddenly saw a big black man standing quietly in a corner. From the way he had his back toward everyone, Jang Maldong could easily tell that he was sulking. Seeing how petty the big guy was, Jang Maldong chuckled. The news of Jang Maldong's return spread quickly. The importance that the name Jang Maldong carried was partly because he was a veteran who had been active in paradise far longer than anyone else. However, the real reason lied behind the achievements of the earthlings he had raised. Although not all acclaimed earthlings studied under him, every earthling who did became a big shot known by everyone. This was both the proof of Jang Maldong's discerning eye and his undeniable skill as a trainer. But if one asked whether these two things were reason for his fame, then that wouldn't be entirely correct. In any case, once Jang Maldong's return was confirmed, the first person to visit him was Ainz Kazuki, the leader of Yumi Tsubaim, one of the best teams in Haramark. Their relationship wasn't bad as they once were master and disciple, but for some reason, Kazuki didn't look so happy. It almost looked like he was here because he was forced to come. Having read his face, Jang Maldong also didn't look at Kazuki in a good light. This was because of his knowledge that standing behind Yumi Tsubaim was the huge Japan Business Federation. Although Kazuki came, he couldn't bring himself to open his mouth easily. A man who could kill his beloved younger sister was this uncomfortable. While curiosity filled Sial Jihu's expression, Chohong and Hugo already seemed to know the answer as they maintained their silence. After hesitating for a long time, Kazuki opened his mouth with the words, "It's the wishes of the Federation head." He congratulates your return and wishes to express the Japan Business Federation's desire to support Carp Diem as much as it can. Tell me the reason you're here. Hearing Jang Maldong's brusque tone, Kazuki cut straight to the point. The Federation head will be sending a skilled archer. He wants Master Jang and Carp Diem to make full use of him. In exchange, he wishes for you to grant him the honor of receiving your mystic acupuncture. I refuse. Jang Maldong refused flatly before Kazuki could even finish. As you might expect, I have no intention of holding a needle ever again. Kazuki closed his eyes. He looked like he had nothing to say. Is that all? In case you refused, he gave an option 2 and option 3, and as long as you permit it, he wishes to come visit you himself. Tell Tsuji Yuki this. Jang Maldong raised his hand as if it wasn't even worth hearing the rest. The moment you even bring up the knee from the word needle in front of me. He gripped his cane tight and stared at Kazuki with piercing eyes. I will cut off all connection with you. Needle, what was this mystic acupuncture? Sial Jihu tilted his head, all the while swallowing his saliva at the heavy aura Jang Maldong was giving off. Jang Maldong and Kazuki were simply sitting on the couch, but a heavy atmosphere different than what Sial Jihu was used to filled the air. Raise your head. Kazuki's drooped head must have tugged at his heart as Jang Maldong's voice softened. I got a little worked up thinking about the past. I'm not angry at you. Thank you. Kazuki slowly looked back up. But still, I can't understand it. Tsuji Yuki should know my personality. When Jang Maldong rubbed his chin and asked, a look of bitterness spread on Kazuki's face. He sent me here on purpose. Because he knew I'd hate it. Kazuki let out a short sigh before opening his mouth. If it is okay, I would like to talk to you from now on as the leader of Yumi Tsubaim. When Jang Maldong nodded, Kazuki slowly continued his words. For the banquet that will soon start, Yumi Tsubaim would like to request cooperation from Carp Diem. Oh, it's already time for the banquet. Chohong suddenly cut in. Jang Maldong furrowed his brows but opened his mouth after hearing the word banquet. Now that I think about it, it should be coming up soon. Yes, 6 weeks later will be the 2-year mark since the end of the 4th banquet. Looks like people are still in a frenzy considering what happened in the last one. Yes, it's quite incredible. Some people are already on the move, Kazuki replied firmly. Tusk, people's greed really knows no bounds. Do they want to repeat the same mistake again? That catastrophic incident only occurred once. And besides, this one is a special banquet. What about the Haramark royal family? I heard that they plan to ban Earthlings from participating in the banquet after that incident. It's been cancelled. The recent high death count among high rankers seems to have affected their decision. Xiao Jihu scratched his cheek, hearing their back-and-forth conversation. Cho Hong and Hugo were also paying attention, so it seemed they knew what Kazuki and Zhang Maldong were talking about. But for Xiao Jihu, all this talk about a banquet or whatever was new. There's still a lot I don't know, However, he did have a vague idea. This banquet was likely to be the reason for Haramark's heated atmosphere, which he had been noticing since the day he came back. But why? Yumi Tsubame, no. The Japan Business Federation should have already acquired a couple of entrances. It's because the current state of Yumi Tsubame isn't good. The Federation head transferred half of the team to form a separate elite team. Zhang Maldong's face seemed to ask what nonsense he was spouting now. The Japan Business Federation's power has weakened that much? Wait, they're forming a team of elites, but they left you out. Kazuki fell silent. A moment later, he let out a dry chuckle. You got on the Federation head's bad side, Yes, Kazuki replied firmly. He ordered me to not participate in the rescue mission, but I didn't listen. Ah, right, I heard you participated too. Zhang Maldong nodded his head as if he finally understood things. Well, command and discipline is that bastard's creed, so I see why he'd be upset. Besides, you know the Federation head's personality. My young sister was among the captives. I didn't have a choice. Xiao Jihu could hear Zhang Maldong click his tongue. After a brief moment of silence, Zhang Maldong opened his mouth. I'm not so sure. The Business Federation has 2 entrances. The fact that they took your teammates means that they will not allow you to participate. Yes, I also believe that to be the case. But I wasn't told that I was forbidden from participating explicitly. So what will you do? Kazuki's eyes shone at this question. There are more entrances available. To be more precise, I have been contacted by someone in a similar situation. However, he possesses an entrance. In other words, Kazuki was proposing for Carp Diem to join a 3-way cooperation. When Zhang Maldong asked who it was, Kazuki immediately revealed the other party's identity. He is a middle-level executive of the Triads, a man named Hao Win. Chapter 105. The village head's gift, too, Hao Win. Xiao Jihu couldn't yell, given the intense atmosphere, but that was a name he couldn't ignore. Similar situation. From the looks of it, Yumi Tsubame seemed to be a team under an organization named Japan Business Federation. Kazuki seemed to be ostracized for going against the organization's orders, but what was this about Hao Win being in a similar situation? Are those guys still having internal conflicts? Zhang Maldong didn't hide his feeling of discontent, asking for cooperation in the middle of internal conflicts. It was up for interpretation, but it sure sounded like they were asking Carp Diem to step their feet in the mud. However, Kazuki shook his head. No, things have died down after a huge incident. There is still some veiled enmity and strife for political power, but it's more of a rite of passage than a conflict. Zhang Maldong's sharp eyes softened slightly. Kazuki continued. As I'm sure you know, individuals who join an organization seek to be promoted through their activities in paradise. The members of the Triads are good examples of this. True, they do encourage their members to actively participate. Yes, the Triads didn't directly translate their internal hierarchy from Earth to paradise. Instead, they chose to abolish some of the levels of hierarchy. Of course, they still included their core executives, but it was still an innovative idea at the time. Yes, it wasn't bad. After all, that is what enabled them to grab hold of powerful authority in paradise. Difficult talks went back and forth. Cho Hong was yawning as if she was extremely bored, and Hugo was just standing there, completely zoned out. It really looked like he wasn't thinking about anything. But after their forces stabilized in paradise, internal problems began to arise, eventually causing a collapse in their hierarchy. That is often the case with large organizations. The culture of the Triads organization was overly competitive. Their innovative idea of getting rid of the existing hierarchy simply came back to bite them. It must have been bad since I heard the news of assassinations even on Earth. Sial Jihu listened to their conversation attentively. It was hard for him to understand everything they were saying, but he tried his best, remembering Jang Maldong's words to learn to read the political atmosphere. Scientia potentia est. Knowledge is power. Even someone with great physical prowess would easily be taken advantage of if they were stupid. As Sial Jihu planned to form his own team in the future, he felt the need to learn to understand these kind of things, so as to be able to survive in paradise. Of course, he was also curious since the story involved Hao Win. The leading executives of the triads knew about this problem, but they failed to control the discord. And because of the prolonged internal strife, they even had to give up the initiative to Cecilia. And the special countermeasure they came up with is this man named Hao Win? Yes. If the triad's culture hasn't changed, he will just be treated as another amateur who got in through connections. Kazuki slowly nodded, but things have gotten better. After taking that huge blow from Cecilia, voices to change their culture have gotten louder. All members of the triads want to recover their past glory. As long as Hao Win proves that he is capable, reuniting the organization shouldn't be impossible. What an interesting brat. So he wants to participate in the banquet and prove his ability. That's why I said this matter was similar to a rite of passage. That man named Hao Win, what do you think of him? Kazuki put on an uncertain look. I'm not sure, but he seemed like a cheerful guy on the surface. Sial Jihu agreed with Kazuki's evaluation and snickered to himself quietly. After that, a few more words were exchanged before silence descended. Then Jang Maldong opened his mouth after a long deliberation. As you already know, we aren't in the best situation right now. Can you give us some time to think about it? Of course, we still have more than enough time on our hands after all. We'll come to a decision by tomorrow. Anyways, Jang Maldong grinned, seeing Kazuki getting up from the couch. Looks like you're starting to think about going independent. Kazuki shut his mouth for a moment, then heaved out a short sigh. It's just difficult to go about things alone. Since I have the opportunity, I decided to grab it. The Federation head indeed isn't an easy opponent. I believe I've already done what was expected of me. With that, Kazuki bowed. Once Ainz Kazuki left, Carp Diem's office got a bit noisy to talk about their participation in the banquet. We should go. It's an opportunity that comes around once every 2 years. I'm going for sure. Hugo raised his voice, saying they should obviously participate. I don't know. We only have 3 people. Let's just look for an archer. But Chohong looked bothered by the whole thing and argued against Hugo. Fuck what? You don't care anymore now that you're a high ranker? You going won't change a thing. I know you're in a hurry, but do you really think you'll make it to stage 3? Chohong and Hugo began to bicker. Jang Maldong stared at them with disappointment before turning around while massaging his temples. Then he found the youth deep in thought and stared at him fixedly. Oh, right. He remembered Chohong hinting to make Sial Jihu the new leader. Although he planned to appoint the new archer he would bring in as the leader, there was no reason Sial Jihu couldn't be the leader either. He knew that it was better for someone established in the team to become the leader than someone completely new. Wanting to test Sial Jihu, Jang Maldong threw him a question. What do you think? What? I really don't know. Sial Jihu jumped in surprise at the sudden question and then shook his head. It's fine, so tell me. When Jang Maldong pressed him, he took a moment to collect his thoughts, then spoke. Considering Carp Diem's current position, I think it will be better to participate. Right? Hugo screamed, thinking Sial Jihu was taking his side. Jang Maldong swung his cane and silenced the bickering duo before collecting his roughened breath and sitting back down on the couch. Tell me the reason. As you know, Carp Diem's stock has significantly reduced in value. Stock. Yes, it lost the symbol of its team after all. Well, yes, but by that logic, isn't it important to absorb new blood into the team as quickly as possible? Blood can't be absorbed unconditionally. I don't think Carp Diem is a typo. In fact, I'd say it's an Rh negative. His analogy piqued Jang Maldong's interest. The problem here is whether an archer of Dylan's caliber would be willing to enter this difficult-to-handle team. So you're saying a skilled archer wouldn't want to enter the current carp team? I wouldn't go that far, but he would certainly weigh his options. And you're suggesting we come up with something to tip the scale in our favor? Sial Jihu nodded. Yes, from what I heard, this banquet seems to be a special event that draws in attention from all of paradise. I think this would be an excellent opportunity to prove our worth. Sial Jihu further added that their success would have a synergistic effect of bolstering people's expectations in them due to Jiang Maldong's temporary return and news of Chohong becoming a high ranker. Well, that's just what I think from the perspective of our team. Seeing the youth laugh awkwardly, Jiang Maldong rubbed his chin. His anger instantly subsided and a sense of relief rushed in. Chohong and Hugo had been troubling him, but he suddenly felt relieved. Dylan, you always had good eyes for people. When he was looking for an archer to join Carp Team, it seemed that he didn't need to worry about finding one with qualities of a leader. Chohong, Jiang Maldong smiled. Go visit Yumi Tsubaim. Carp Team's participation in the banquet was decided. The answer was yes. After accepting Kazuki's offer of a three-way team cooperation, Jiang Maldong immediately began his preparation. Although they still had 6 weeks left until the start of the banquet, the word procrastination wasn't in his dictionary. You can say that the banquet is part of an ancient inheritance. Sial Jihu tilted his head at Jiang Maldong's explanation. I thought it was either a dungeon or a ruin. You're right and wrong at the same time, Jiang Maldong slowly continued. Some say it's a stage created by a god from the era of the ancient empire to carry out some sort of a test. Others say it is a game created by a grand magician for his amusement. Some even call it a lair that the extinct dragons created as a dummy. How mysterious. If you want to know more, ask Ian. He likes things like this, so he'll have more detailed information. Now, what we do know for sure is this. Jiang Maldong snatched the cane he'd been waving around in the air. Entrances leading to an unknown place open biannually all across paradise. That's it. We also know that this place is separated into 3 stages, but what's inside changes every year. Sial Jihu swallowed his saliva. He thought that they would just have to fight some monsters and look for treasures, but the scale of the event was far bigger than what he'd imagined. Still, he couldn't figure out why everyone was so worked up about this mysterious festival. It truly was an enigma, to be honest. The end of the cane pointed at Sial Jihu. It's way too early for you to participate in the banquet. I thought so. If you look at the distribution of participants, a vast majority of them are level 4s. Almost everyone who is remotely decent will flock to this event. To be frank, if you're alone, you'll find it difficult to clear even the first stage. Sial Jihu wasn't angry, but he couldn't help but feel a little bitter. But since every participant is part of a team, there are some way outs. Sial Jihu was afraid Jiang Maldong would prohibit him from participating, so his eyes sparkled when he heard this. You mean I can go? Yes, but under 2 conditions. Conditions? Yep. First, you will have to take on the role of an archer in this team. Sial Jihu was dumbstruck by this unexpected condition. I can't. I don't even know how to use a bow. You can't shoot an arrow, but you have that, don't you? Remembering Mana's spear, Sial Jihu furrowed his brows. Jiang Maldong continued without batting an eye. Second, you'll be required to quit and exit the banquet at Stage 2. Well, Stage 3 isn't a place you can go just because you want to. Jiang Maldong found Sial Jihu standing at a loss for words and stopped. Then he heaved out a light sigh. In the first place, it doesn't make sense for a level 2 to participate in the banquet. I'm level 3 now. When Sial Jihu muttered quietly, Jiang Maldong blinked his eyes. Chohong and Hugo, who were prowling about on the side, also paused their movements. But because they knew he had participated in the rescue mission, they weren't too surprised. Level 3? Really? Yes, I can show you if you'd like. That's truly an incredible speed, but still my answer is no. Sial Jihu's eyes widened. Jiang Maldong snorted. Don't make that face. But, do you think the banquet is a joke? Jiang Maldong's voice carried a hint of annoyance. Having detected danger, Chohong and Hugo quickly signaled each other to get ready to bail. Do you think you're going on an expedition where you scurry onward and beat up some monsters? Even Dylan and Kazuki, Both of them participated in the banquet twice, and neither of them managed to step a foot inside stage 3. Yes, sir. I'm not done. Listen. I'm not trying to get you to change your class. If the enemy breaks through the vanguard of the team, then you can act as a warrior. Otherwise, you'll be an archer. Just so you don't misunderstand, I'm not treating you like you're a burden. And I'm not allowing you to participate because I don't have a choice. I would have held you back if I didn't think you'd be useful. Taking Seol Jihu's silence as a sign of acknowledgement, Jang Maldong cleared his throat before continuing. If you want to participate in the banquet, you have to do it as an archer. Spend the next 6 weeks focusing on training Mana Spear and you'll be useful to the team. I also heard that you have an item called Festina Earring, so... Just as Cho Hong and Hugo breathed a sigh of relief. No. Seol Jihu dropped a bombshell. For a moment, Jang Maldong wasn't sure he heard correct and blinked his eyes repeatedly. Cho Hong and Hugo jumped in disbelief and waved their hands in fear for what was to come, but Seol Jihu wasn't looking at them. You don't want to go? I do, but... But what? What you're saying is that I should just throw Mana Spears all the while being protected by the team. And what's wrong with that? Jang Maldong looked genuinely confused. You think a spearman only swings his spear around. Spear throwing is a bona fide spear technique. What's gotten into you all of a sudden? Listen, brat. I can't let you take on such a dangerous position because the banquet is too full of uncertainties. My answer is the same. I'm not an archer. Seol Jihu remained stubborn. Not expecting Seol Jihu to protest so adamantly, the hair on Jang Maldong's aged face stood up with anger. You... When he gripped his wooden cane, Cho Hong quickly ran for her life. However, Seol Jihu looked slightly angry as well. Staring at the old man's furious gaze, he spoke clearly. Let me participate as a warrior. You little... When Jang Maldong was about to blow up. I don't want to run away. Seol Jihu stared at him with a sincere look. At Arden Valley, inside the laboratory and outside, even when I was escaping the parasite's blockade, all I've done is run away. Jang Maldong became speechless and sat there with his mouth agape. Looking back, that was indeed true. Seol Jihu's life in paradise had so far been a series of escapes. Every time he encountered a serious incident, he ran away, risking his life to escape from his enemy's pursuit. I don't want to do that anymore. Most importantly, the time he fell down to the forest of denial was deeply engraved in his mind. Even when his thigh was pierced by the enemy, all he did was pray. For somebody to help him, for somebody to save his life, he remembered. Sir. Just how pitiful he was. And how much he despaired. He never wanted to taste that feeling of helplessness again. I'm not training so I can run away. Jang Maldong's raised eyebrows twitched. I want to fight proudly as a warrior. His eyes gazed at the youth who was bowing down to his waist. Please reconsider. Hearing the youth's earnest and desperate plea, Jang Maldong took in a deep breath. His gentle eyes gleamed with piercing light. You, arrogant fool, a weakling who's only full of greed. His restrained voice could only be described as hoarse. After a minute that seemed like an hour, "Kyuk," drrrk, the sound of a chair being dragged rang out. Seol Jihu, who was expecting to get beaten, raised his head in shock. You cocky brat, I went out of my way to think what's best for you, but what? You say you're not training so you can run away. You want to fight proudly as a warrior? He could see Jang Maldong gritting his teeth in fury. Fine, since you can't understand it with your brain, I'll let your body figure it out. Yes, sir. And sure, if that's what you so desperately want, I'll allow it. That is, as long as you can follow my training regime. Was this what the growling of an apex predator sounded like? Jang Maldong blurted out in a voice as heated as an erupting volcano. Then he struck the floor hard with his cane. Hugo. Hugo was stealthily making his way out when he halted his steps at Jang Maldong's sudden roar. Pack your bags. B-bags? W-I? We're going to the huge stone rocky mountain. Do it fast. Hick. Hugo wheezed out a gasp of horror. I'll have to tell Kazuki as well. That we'll be back 7 days before. Jang Maldong stopped in the middle of his furious panting. I'm letting you know now. This is what you asked for. You brought this upon yourself. He half raised his head and sent Seol Jihu an intimidating explanation. Don't you dare cry in the middle of it. I'll kick you out right away. It'll be the same if you can't follow my training. And even if you do, I won't permit you to participate in the banquet if you can't meet my expectations. Got it? Jang Maldong was only glaring at him, but Seol Jihu felt like his body was shrinking automatically. He felt like he could even see intense flames shooting toward him. However, Seol Jihu didn't cower. Yes, instead he shouted vigorously. Damned brat, let's see if you can perform as well as you can shout. After a final snort, Jang Maldong stomped out of the office. Jang Maldong really packed his bags and borrowed a carriage that day. But Seol Jihu wasn't the only one going. Poor Hugo was dragged along, even as he raved in refusal. Since they couldn't leave the office empty, Cho-hong was told to remain as the proxy leader. She protested, of course, but when Jang Maldong asked, "You want to go to huge stone Rocky Mountain too?" she accepted his order without a single word of complaint. Although it seemed like it was just the three of them going, two outsiders ended up tagging along. These two had expressed their desire to participate after learning about the situation. And although Jang Maldong didn't seem too keen on the idea, for some unknown reason, he didn't reject them either. The one thing Seol Jihu did know was that Jang Maldong asked them to help train him. The two of them agreed readily, which was unsurprising given that they would receive Jang Maldong's guidance in return. Just like that, the group of 5 people got on the carriage to huge stone Rocky Mountain. Giddy-ap. The coachman swung his horsewhip, and the carriage pulled by 4 horses drove out of the castle gate. Click, clack, clear hoof sounds rang out as the carriage made its way through the field. However, the inside of the carriage was filled with dead silence. Jang Maldong had his arms crossed and his eyes closed as if to rein in his boiling anger, while Seol Jihu was quietly burning his fighting spirit. The two outsiders, a man and a woman, remained silent as well. Hua Ang. Only Hugo's sorrowful cries mixed into the air and flowed out. Chapter 106. The Village Head's Gift, 3. The carriage raced through the fields and only stopped once it arrived at the foot of the mountain. Although the village head said that it would take a day by carriage, in reality it did not even take half a day. This was to be expected since 4 horses had run at full speed. Seol Jihu got off with his bags and took a deep breath of the mountain's grassy air and felt it tickling his nose. Perhaps because the mountain's energy was deeply ingrained in the air, it tasted fresh and clean like spring water. While enjoying this soul-cleansing mossy aroma, Seol Jihu looked up at the overwhelmingly large mountain in front of him with eyes full of admiration. Because of its name, Huge Stone Rocky Mountain, he expected it to be full of rocks like a valley. Instead, it actually had lush and dense greenery. The white snow and the fog covering the mountain peak made it look like the legendary Kunlun Mountain. There's something I'm curious about. Seol Jihu was busy marveling at the majestic scenery when a cold voice flowed into his ears. The owner of the voice was a handsome man with sharp eyes that gave him an angry look. When Seol Jihu tilted his head, Kazuki approached him. "Why is she here?" He glanced at the carriage that had yet to leave. At the same time, a woman with her hair slicked back and tied in a dango-like bundle came out. Her eyes were just as sharp as Kazuki's, and today she didn't have her glasses or the maid outfit that covered her body. For some reason, she was wearing a lemon-colored sports bra that matched her hair color along with black leggings that wrapped tightly around her waist. Well, her exposed collarbones, round ankle bone, and willowy waist all revealed her alluring figure, making Seol Jihu at a loss for words. She stretched her interlocked hands to the sky and slowly cracked her head left and right. Seeing Agnes with his mouth agape, Seol Jihu felt Kazuki's gaze and quickly muttered out some words. She said she felt her strength was lacking after failing her last mission. "No," Kazuki shook his head. "It's easy to make up a reason. What I'm wondering is..." At that moment, Agnes glanced to the side, making Kazuki shut up. When the gaze disappeared, he finished his sentence quietly. "How did she know you were coming here to train?" "Oh, I told her." "Why?" "She comes to Carp Diem to help me train from time to time, so I didn't want her to make a trip in vain while I was gone." "She helps you train? That person?" Kazuki put on a look of disbelief. It's hard to see that as a simple sign of goodwill. You're not affiliated with Cecilia, after all. She taught me in the neutral zone. She's been giving me good advice ever since. After giving this clear answer, Sial Jihu put on a face that asked what was wrong. Why? When Kazuki didn't say anything, a hint of nervousness appeared on his face. Could it be that the two of you have a bad relationship? No, Kazuki denied. That's not it, but... He looked troubled as if the reason was hard to say. Seeing this, Sial Jihu tactfully changed the subject. Anyways, is it okay for you to be here, Mr. Kazuki? Me. If you're talking about my duties as Yumi Tsubame's leader, I made sure to transfer them to the right person. Having noticed Sial Jihu's intentions, Kazuki immediately took his goodwill. And there's something I felt during the second banquet I participated in. That is that the banquet is full of spontaneity and randomness, so whatever external preparation you make might be useless. Rather than potentially wasting your time, it will be much more worthwhile to train. It sounds like you're saying you can only trust your skills. Well, I wouldn't say that exactly. After all, luck isn't part of someone's skills. Sial Jihu was about to ask, "Luck?" But he heard the sound of the carriage leaving. When he subconsciously turned around, he saw Hugo staring at the carriage slowly disappearing into the distance with swollen eyes. Anyways, I'm sorry. It seems my greed caused a misunderstanding. Sial Jihu's eyes widened at Kazuki's apology. You must have been excited at the prospect of receiving Master Zhang's personal training. You must feel like unwelcome guests came to crash your party. Kazuki's Yumi Tsubame had a friendly relationship with the triads. On the other hand, Carp Diem had a friendly relationship with Cecilia. Connecting these 2 points with Zhang Maldong's return, one should be able to guess what Kazuki meant by misunderstanding. However, Sial Jihu didn't know about the delicate relationships between outside organizations and just said what he honestly thought. Not at all. In fact, I'm excited to train together with you and Miss Agnes. Since there's that promise we made Master Zhang, I'll do my best to help you too. Kazuki breathed a sigh of relief as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. Soon, the carriage completely disappeared from their view, and they heard Zhang Maldong yelling what they were standing around for. Just when I erased it from my memories. Just when I stopped having nightmares about it. The bald black man with a mountain-like build sobbed constantly as if he really didn't want to go. Sial Jihu couldn't help but laugh. However, both Kazuki and Agnes nodded their heads as if they understood him. Seeing this, Sial Jihu revealed a puzzled look. This is what you wanted. Suddenly, Zhang Maldong's intimidating words brushed past his head. His excitement immediately died down. Get a grip. You're not here on a picnic, Sial Jihu. You're here to train, to not run away, to not rely on luck. To be able to face danger squarely. To not rely on future vision, to get stronger. After stealing his resolve, Sial Jihu followed the sobbing Hugo tottering up the mountain. The Haramark region wasn't a safe zone. As huge stone rocky mountain was undeniably dangerous, Kazuki should normally stand at the lead, but it was actually Zhang Maldong who was in that position. Of all the time he spent in paradise, half was spent in this mountain. Naturally, he knew more about its geography than any native from the neighboring village, and thus had no problem acting as the pathfinder. He knew the paths like the back of his hand, and he even had the map Arbor Muto gave him. He sure hit it well. Only 30 minutes passed for Zhang Maldong to find Arbor Muto's hideout and remark sarcastically, "Master Zhang, please wait." It was then that Kazuki asked the group to stop. At first glance, the cave was too exposed to be called a hideout. Seeing the trees and vegetation around the cave damaged, Kazuki opened his mouth. It seems like the cave was well hidden at first, but it looks like something found it and turned it into its living space. An individual or a group? Kazuki lowered his gaze. He examined the earth before calmly replying. Cave Ettins, as for the number, it's small. There are 8 of them inside the cave, but I can't detect their movements. Sleeping, most likely. They don't like being outside during the day unless they are hungry. While Sial Jihu was astonished by his quick analysis, Kazuki took out his crossbow. When he loaded his bolt and pointed it forward, Zhang Maldong blocked him with his cane. "Master Zhang, Jang Maldong turned back and looked at Xiao Jihu. Tell me the 4 elements that make up the formation of Kai. It was a sudden question, but Xiao Jihu faithfully replied what he learned. Their quantity, speed, and power of the flow, control, and imagination. Jang Maldong didn't say anything and picked up a fist-sized rock from the ground. Then, before anyone could stop him, he threw it into the cave. Tack, tack, drrrrrr. The sound of the rock hitting the ground and rolling in the cave echoed out in the silent mountain. A unique trait of the cave Ainz was that they had 2 heads. As one of them stayed awake at all times to stay alert, it was impossible for them to have not heard this sound. Since cave Ainz also had a sharp sense of smell, it was only a matter of time for them to notice enemies approaching. And, as expected, a few seconds later, screeching noises began echoing out from the cave. Jang Maldong opened his mouth. Get ready. Give them a blow as soon as they pop out. Xiao Jihu roused his mana without hesitation. Powerful energy at the high intermediate level instantly flowed through his circuit and shot out of his right hand. The explosive burst of mana only remained shapeless for a second. Soon, it danced like flowing water and slowly gathered shape until it formed a spear. Although it was only 60 centimeters long, anyone could see that the blue spear was made of mana. They're coming, Hugo muttered briefly, drrrr. The moment Xiao Jihu heard them rush out of the cave, he performed a run-up without a moment of hesitation. The posture he perfected after thousands of trials from the crossover to the release, his body had thoroughly memorized the movement. Agnes, who was watching this, expressed a hint of surprise. It's perfect. Each of his movements connected naturally. Xiao Jihu's right arm released the mana spear at the same time the cave Ainz shot out of the cave. Boom! When the spear left his hand, the sound of an exploding grenade rang out. The cave Ainz running out at the forefront paused. Its body shook back and forth like a pendulum before collapsing like a stringless puppet. Karuk, another cave Ainz running out of the cave, faltered. It frowned at the explosive sound. It saw its fallen comrades' 2 heads, one vaporized without a trace and the other torn to shreds. The cave Ainz took its eyes off the scattered flesh and blood and faced the front. Then, its eyes caught sight of a blue spear flying toward them. Thwack! A hole opened up on its muscular chest. The force of the blow caused it to hunch forward, and its feet flew off the ground. Oh shit! Even the depressed Hugo exclaimed in awe when he saw the cave Ainz flying backward with its limbs out. Boom! Boom! 1 shot, 1 kill. Each of Xiao Jihu's spears claimed a cave Ainz's life. That wasn't all. Unlike normal spear throws, the shockwave from the explosions affected the surroundings. Kazuki's eyes narrowed when he saw some of the cave Ainz lose their balance and fall even without being hit. In fact, some of them had been injured just from the shockwave. Stop! Jang Maldong shouted and suddenly threw Xiao Jihu his ice spear. Take care of the remaining ones with this. Also, you're banned from using that earring and bracelet. After snatching the spear out of the air, Xiao Jihu charged forward like a ray of light. He was heated up after confirming the might of the mana spear. Since he was told to fight like a warrior, he had no reason to refuse. Not having fought for a long time, Xiao Jihu pounced like a furious lion. The cave Ainz also got up in anger at their comrades' deaths. How is it? While Xiao Jihu was fighting the cave Ainz, Jang Maldong asked the man standing next to him. He's good. Kazuki replied without looking back. He kept his eyes on the battlefield with his crossbow loaded just in case. That mana spear of his has both piercing power and destructive power. Just these 2 would have been more than enough, but it even has splash effects. Right, that ability will certainly be useful in the banquet. Kazuki nodded his head and agreed. Of course it will. It's a bit of a shame that he can't fire them quickly in succession, but it will be a good option for the team to have. And what if consecutive firing is possible? Then nothing else needs to be said. It already has the speed of an archer and the destructive power of a magician. I can see it being used to ambush a target or to start a fight. Kazuki praised him greatly. This was to be expected since he was witnessing the product of Gyola's carefully crafted one-of-a-kind class for a warrior with high innate mana. I'm looking forward to the banquet. Hearing this final comment from Kazuki, Jang Maldong asked once again, "Then what about now?" His close-quarter combat. The two of them had been watching Seol Jihu's battle the whole time. The youth was thrusting, striking, and cutting to his heart's content. Although no one would call the fight a slaughter, it was easy to see that Seol Jihu was overwhelming the cave Ainz. I'm not sure. Well, compared to others his level. I'm not asking you to compare apples and oranges. Compare him to you. Kazuki raised his brows. Compare him to me. That's right. He's amazing, isn't he? Was Master Jang trying to show off his disciple? Kazuki tilted his head. He put down his crossbow and glanced to the side. Jang Maldong's face was frighteningly stiff. Yes. Noticing the grave atmosphere, Kazuki quietly agreed. He observed Seol Jihu more closely before making another evaluation. He's amazingly bad. The corners of Jang Maldong's mouth twisted up. Right, if he participates in the banquet like this, he'll be killed in an instant, but only as a warrior. He will be fine if he uses that spear-throwing ability. As long as the team protects him properly, he should be able to contribute until stage 2. Kazuki explained, not knowing the stubborn request Seol Jihu made. I already told him that, but he said no. Pardon. He was adamant about taking the position of a warrior, that damned brat. He said he didn't want to just throw spears. Kazuki doubted his ears. I mean, it's important to have close combat skills, but how is it strange for a spearman to throw his spear? That's what I want to ask. Jang Maldong smacked his stifled chest. Hugo pouted his lower lip from the side. Why did we come here anyway? When Chohong and I were being stubborn, you just beat us up until we were convinced. I would have done that if that guy was as stupid as you two. Jang Maldong snorted and crossed his arms. But he's someone who uses his brain. He seems to have some level of insight, too. When someone like him is being stubborn, it means he has something pent up inside him. Then, what will you do? I'll make him realize it by himself. That's the only way. He needs to face reality and give up. Kazuki finally realized why Jang Maldong allowed outsiders to join them. It'll be a day, maybe 2 at the longest. The battle was coming to a close. Jang Maldong clicked his tongue. Tusk, he's still not done against a bunch of cave Ainz. Seol Jihu took care of all the cave Ainz living in the hideout. He was satisfied with his mana spear and considered his following battles stable. He felt like he made great strides forward from the first expedition he went to. Thinking everything went well, he was certain Jang Maldong saw him in a different light as well. Once the battle was over, the 5 of them went into the cave. The hideout was a wide tunnel set up with basic living necessities like a table, a drawer, and a bed. One thing Seol Jihu was glad of was that the cave Ainz didn't damage the place. After collecting all the books the village head had asked for, Seol Jihu searched the place carefully. Since the village head mentioned the payment would be inside the hideout, there had to be something worthwhile here. However, he didn't notice anything special on the table or in the drawer. But when he opened the storage closet installed on the cave wall, his mouth opened wide. The 80-centimeter-long 4-level storage closet was filled with all sorts of colorful glass bottles. The entire closet almost looked like a jewelry shop displaying its prized accessories. Kazuki carefully picked up an orange bottle. This looks like an explosive reagent. Wait, isn't this an aphrodisiac? Hugo looked at a pink bottle with sparkling eyes. Seol Jihu was quite distracted by the whole thing. A high-quality healing potion, a bottle filled with salt, a strange bottle shining in 5 colors. There were so many of them that he didn't know what was what. However, the bottles containing a milky liquid felt somewhat familiar to him. In any case, the group decided to check their effects at a later time and began to unpack. Since they were planning on staying here for a long time, they immediately began to clean up the place. It went without saying that everything in the hideout belonged to Seol Jihu. Hugo was envious since many of the bottles looked expensive and valuable, but he didn't dare to touch any of them under Jang Maldong's strict orders. It was the same for Agnes and Kazuki. There was a reason Jang Maldong made Seol Jihu fight by himself. The group took about an hour to clean the place thoroughly. When they went outside, the sun was slowly setting on the western horizon. After ordering Agnes, Kazuki, and Hugo to train by themselves, Jang Maldong turned to the dazedly standing Seol Jihu and asked, "Tell me the spear techniques you've learned so far." When Seol Jihu answered thrust, strike, and cut, Jang Maldong nodded his head. "Perform them for me while wearing 12 sandbags. You can use as much mana as you want. You can even use aura if you need to." Here. Don't make me repeat myself. You can go wild, so show me everything you've got. How many times should I do it? Until I tell you to stop." It was a truly random request. Why was Jang Maldong telling him to show his spear techniques? Although Seol Jihu was curious, he quietly picked up his spear and took his stance. Start. Swish. A spear full of mana cut through the air. Seol Jihu repeated the 3 techniques with care. "It's been a while since I've last done this." He suddenly remembered desperately striking the target in the neutral zone. As he had practiced these 3 techniques 1,000 times every day, he was well accustomed to doing them. Jang Maldong didn't say much. Quicker, more accurately, harder. He only said these 3 words and watched Seol Jihu silently. After about 2 hours of non-stop thrusting, striking, and cutting. Ha! Ha! Seol Jihu felt his breath getting short. With 3 sandbags on each of his arms and legs, his limbs felt heavy. Because he had been using his mana since the beginning, he was running low on stamina as well. He wished he had some sort of a goal to work towards, but that unfortunately wasn't the case. Seol Jihu shook off this thought and focused on brandishing his spear. There must be a reason. Jang Maldong was praised as Paradise's greatest trainer. Thinking he must have a reason for making him do this, Seol Jihu quietly thrust his spear. How much time went by? He felt something rising from his stomach. His arms felt like they were falling off. The perfect posture he once had was nowhere to be seen, and the movement of his spear became noticeably dull. It was then that Jang Maldong finally told him to stop. "Hawk! Hawk!" Seol Jihu fell on his butt and gasped for air. His body was drenched in sweat. Still, he smiled, relieved that he was told to stop before his stamina ran out. Did I pass the first training? Perhaps because of his regular training, he felt like it was doable. However, he soon shook his head. It was unlikely that this was the end of the training, and he most certainly couldn't be satisfied with himself yet. As such, he set his will ablaze and asked Jang Maldong, "Master, what's next on the training regime?" Next? Jang Maldong, who was looking around the area, raised his eyebrows. "Huh, is this it for today's training? What nonsense are you blabbering? Get up." Jang Maldong spoke as if he had no clue what the youth was talking about. Seol Jihu tilted his head but still got up quickly. "Since we got your stamina low, that should be enough to get your blood flowing." You can take the sandbags off now." A look of confusion flashed across Seol Jihu's blinking eyes. Perhaps he was mistaken, but he made it sound like he didn't even start the warm-up, much less the training. "Oh right, you said you liked running, yes." Seol Jihu looked around his vicinity and swallowed hard. It was true that he liked running, but running on a flat track was completely different from running on a rugged mountain. Moreover, the huge stone Rocky Mountains topography required more jumping and climbing than running. Don't tell me. "Let's start with a light warm-up." An unknown sense of nervousness surged through him. Then, "Before we start the real training, let me give you a piece of advice. Think of the training that is about to start as a battle." When he heard the word start, his nervousness transformed into anxiety. Jang Maldong continued calmly, "I mean, you should treat it as if your life is on the line. Otherwise, it will be difficult for you to finish it." Hearing him say this with a straight face, goosebumps shot up on Seol Jihu's arms. What? It seemed like he was gravely mistaken about something. "Don't forget, training is a battle." Jang Maldong didn't seem to be joking. It didn't even sound like he was trying to be intimidating. He was simply being honest. "Let's see." That place looks good." Jang Maldong raised his cane and pointed at a spot in the distance. Past the rugged terrain, Seol Jihu could see a mountain peak standing tall in the sky. No way. If he was in his normal condition, he felt like he could travel back and forth at least 8 times. But with his exhausted body, just making 2 rounds seemed difficult. However, to Seol Jihu's dismay. "Back and forth 50 times. You can use mana, so make sure you complete it." A bolt of lightning struck him from the clear sky. He was made to use all his mana and stamina, so what did he just say? Also, you're prohibited from using that earring. A look of disbelief spread across Seol Jihu's face as he looked up at the mountain peak. However, Jang Maldong didn't even bat an eye as he opened his mouth. Since you were so stubborn, I trust you'll demonstrate with your actions. Seol Jihu grit his teeth. Thus, now start. The curtains were drawn to the first of Seol Jihu's 4 most difficult and tortuous battles. Chapter 107. Budding. Just like its name suggested, the huge stone rocky mountain was extremely rugged from all the rocks that covered its surface. It also had several peaks piercing through the clouds to the skies. Huck, 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 huck. Furthermore, the word rough didn't begin to describe its roads. The mountain's wildly curved ridges were full of sharply protruding rocks that caused more than a few difficulties when running. Yeah. Not even 5 minutes had passed since Seol Jihu started running, but he was already screaming as his feet kicked off the rugged ground. The slope toward the mountain peak wasn't any different. If anything, the added steepness only made it worse, greatly exacerbating the burden placed on his thighs and calves. This isn't running. It was practically impossible to rein in curse words, but he was too busy gasping for breath to let them escape his mouth. Just moving one leg forward took 2 seconds. It was more fitting to say that he was climbing the mountain rather than running on it. That wasn't all. Since he didn't know when a monster or a wild beast would pop out of the woods, he had to stay mentally alert at all times. Did he lose his focus for a moment? Just as he was about to reach the mountain peak, he lost his footing and slipped. The hands he threw out to balance himself grabbed onto a rock. He pulled himself up to the peak, clutching this rock like a straw, and then he finally heaved out the breath he'd been holding back. It was so miserably dreadful and tiring. He was panting rapidly, as if he was on the verge of taking his last breath. When he turned around with his raspy breathing, his gaze pierced through the foggy clouds around him and landed on the starting point in the distance. Seol Jihu's face contorted. He bit his lower lip hard enough to leave a clear mark, then started to make his way down. People who rock climbed for fun all said the same thing, that the descent was far more exhausting than the ascent. In other words, Seol Jihu couldn't ease up on his run just because he was going downhill. Because of the steepness of the slope, he accelerated naturally. Speeding down a rugged terrain was no different than committing suicide. One would normally have to control themselves so as to not gain too much speed, but the current Seol Jihu found it extremely difficult to do this. Kiyu. Each time he stepped on the ground and forcefully suppressed his momentum, his feet felt like they were on fire. Because there were too many things going on at once, he lost his focus and fell forward from the burden on his body. Thankfully, he was able to get back up without major injuries, but he couldn't do anything about his trembling legs. Seol Jihu fell down and rolled on the ground several more times before he finally made it back to the starting point. By this point, he was half delirious. However, Jang Maldong only watched him silently, and Seol Jihu had to turn around as if a powerful pressure pushed him forward. Once, twice, thrice. The more trips he made back and forth, the more injuries he got on his body. Sweat oozed out from every pore in his body, and his heart pounded as if it would burst out at any moment. He was at his limit. No, for some reason he felt something was off with this training. However, Jang Maldong spoke clearly, like a judge passing down a punishment to the accused. 45 remaining. Instantly, Seol Jihu felt his legs go limp. Was this what it felt like to be a criminal sentenced to death? He had already suffered so much just to complete 5 trips, yet he had to make 45 more. He wasn't even halfway done, but despair began to set in. That was how painful and brutal this training was. Why aren't you running? What, you're quitting already? Seeing Seol Jihu hesitate, a fiery order descended. Don't rest. At the speed you're going, you won't be done until the morning. But, you said you wanted to be a warrior, didn't you? Jang Maldong spoke with indifference. Unless you want to admit you're all talk with nothing to show for yourself, take your foot off in the next second. Yes, sir? Pack your bags. Jang Maldong turned back. Seol Jihu gritted his teeth and kicked off the ground. In the end, he ran for the entire day before managing to complete the 50 trips. When he came back to the cave, it was already dawn. Although dinner was prepared for him, he collapsed before the thought of eating even brushed his mind. Chua. Suddenly, cold water fell on his face. When he blinked his eyes open, he saw Jiang Maldong standing with a bucket. Damned brat, why aren't you up? I thought you were dead. Huh? Get out here, the sun's already up. How long do you plan to continue sleeping? Sial Jihu looked forward in a daze. Serene morning sunlight was illuminating the entrance of the cave. No way, he felt like he closed his eyes just a second ago. However, he heard Jiang Maldong shouting at him to get out. Q. He was sore and stiff all over. When he took a step, even his foot hurt. It had to be a mess full of popped blisters. He didn't have the courage to take a look. When he staggered out of the entrance, his sandbags and ice spear came flying at him. 10,000 times. Perform the thrust strike and cut 10,000 times each. Sial Jihu was putting his sandbags on one by one, but paused when he heard this. It wasn't 10,000 times total, but 10,000 times each. In other words, he had to perform the techniques 30,000 times. And after you're done, run just like you did yesterday, except this time, it'll be 100 times. Ook. He almost vomited just from hearing this. His training load had more than doubled in a single day. Sial Jihu covered his mouth and let out a pained moan. A day went by, then another. On the third day, heavy rain poured down. However, the training continued without a hitch. Even as he was battered by the pouring rain, Sial Jihu desperately thrust, struck, and cut. I don't understand. Agnes, who was quietly staring outside of the cave entrance, opened her mouth. This training will hurt his body. You should at least let him eat nutritious. If you're talking about breakfast, I already gave it to him. Jiang Maldong muttered as he chewed on vegetables he harvested in the mountain. As the two of them had great respect for each other, the way they talked was extremely polite. Well, he ended up throwing it all up during the training, though. If I may be impertinent, I'd like to ask why you are pushing him so far. It's not like you, Master Jiang. It was a rare sight seeing Agnes so worried. However, she couldn't be blamed as Sial Jihu's condition was racing toward the absolute worst. His bright eyes had turned lifeless, and the smile had disappeared from his face. The way he tottered around, it really looked like he was a dead man walking. I have no other choice, Jiang Maldong replied calmly. I think he realizes it himself, but he's currently twisted completely. His mind, technique, and body, all of it. Kazuki and Hugo looked as if they couldn't understand. However, Agnes, who had experience teaching Sial Jihu, carried a complicated look. Are you talking about the incongruity in his mind, technique, and body? It's not so simple. Jiang Maldong shook his head gravely. For him, all three of these fundamental elements are twisted. His talent is exceedingly average, but his mind is incomprehensibly chaotic. His technique seems to be high level, but he can't use it properly. It's the same with his body. He has powerful hidden strength, but his physical body can't handle it. Jiang Maldong fully understood Sial Jihu's dilemma. Comparing him to a geometric shape, he was like a strange polygon with one or two vertices shooting out abnormally. When Jiang Maldong first saw him, he thought, what the heck is he? And he didn't have the slightest idea how to go about fixing him. Before we discuss the disharmony in these three elements, we have to correct the parts that are warped out of shape. If the youth continued to grow like this, it would be irreversible. He would truly become a chaotic mess. Then, there are three ways to fix him. Jiang Maldong furrowed his brows as if the problem was giving him a headache. The first method is to abandon the mind and the body and focus on training the technique to the limit. You mean to draw a line on his growth potential? I understand why you would feel that to be a shame, but even then, he will at least become a high ranker. If he had chosen the path of the magician, he might have even reached the unique rank. That much. A hint of disbelief emerged on Agnes's face. Jiang Maldong was implying he would eventually reach a limit, but that this limit would have an abnormally high ceiling. Agnes knew how special the youth status window was ever since she was in the neutral zone. But the word unique rank wasn't one that could be thrown around so easily. The second method is to suppress the growth of his technique to the limit, while he improves his mind and body until the three elements are even. You mean to correct him by balancing his mind, technique, and body. It will take time, but this is the surest way of going about this. However, Seol Jihu refused this. There was only one method remaining, and that was to combine the first method and the second. More precisely, it was to not limit the technique's growth, bring up the mind and the body to the same level of the technique, and fix the warped parts of the three elements. All of this had to be done in harmony. Since there were more than two things that needed to be done simultaneously, it was only obvious for the difficulty to skyrocket. Would I be able to do it? Agnes thought for a moment before shaking her head. There is a limit to one's willpower. That is not something a human is capable of. I concur. Jang Maldong also agreed. The final method couldn't just be described as difficult. One truly needed willpower transcending the human realm to be able to even attempt it. So he needs to come to terms with it himself. Hearing this, Agnes finally realized why Jang Maldong was making Seol Jihu repeat such a crazy training regime. It was to tell the youth that if he didn't stop now, things would get much harder in the future. In any case, this is quite a surprise. I didn't expect you, Miss Agnes, to worry about him so much. That's... When Jang Maldong brought up this topic, Agnes told him that she taught Seol Jihu back in the neutral zone. Jang Maldong put on a surprised look. So that's what happened. Did he handle your training well? He completed it outstandingly. I see. Well, you wouldn't be here if he didn't, Fufu. Jang Maldong laughed and got up as if he finally understood. I was thinking he was lasting well. It makes sense if he trained under the infamous demonic instructor. Thank you for the good info. Jang Maldong grinned. Fourth day, the rain stopped. As if the previous day's downpour was a lie, scorching sunlight beat down. The training changed too. The intensity went up and a new drill was added. The training started out the same way as always, performing 30,000 spear techniques in the air. As soon as this ended, Jang Maldong made Seol Jihu wear all 12 sandbags, and today he said he would change the running course. He said to make the mountain peaks on the left and right side as halfway points. In other words, rather than going back and forth in a straight line, Seol Jihu now had to run in a zigzag. As he was finally getting used to the straight path, this change struck him like a bolt of lightning from the clear sky. That wasn't all. Every time he completed 10 trips, he was made to perform the thrust strike and cut 1,000 times each. What pained him the most was that Jang Maldong began to actively intervene in the training. He didn't give Seol Jihu even the slightest break between each drill. In just 10 or so minutes, Seol Jihu had to complete 3 sets of burpees and kettlebell swings. And when he was about to collapse at the end of it all, tack, 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 who told you to faint? Get up. Och, och. Jang Maldong brutally swung his cane. In the end, Seol Jihu had to grit his teeth and turn his steps to the mountain peak, 5th day. Jang Maldong wasn't always with him when he was training. There were times when he left to see how the others were doing, but that didn't mean no one was watching Seol Jihu. Today, Kazuki came as a replacement. After Seol Jihu completed his 30th trip and was repeating the thrust, strike, and cut, woo-ek, vomit suddenly poured out of his mouth. His stomach had been unable to digest the lunch he had forced inside. However, he only faltered for a moment. He immediately went back to performing the thrust, not caring to even wipe his mouth. You shouldn't overdo it. Kazuki was silently watching him until now, but he finally opened his mouth. No one has ever seen the end of the banquet on their first time. Seol Jihu didn't say anything. Kazuki could tell he was listening from the way he glanced his way once, but the youth didn't open his mouth. It couldn't be helped since the current Seol Jihu was pushed to the point where every single breath was precious. You're still a level 3. You can try again 2 years later when you're level 4 or higher. Seol Jihu's face contorted. Sometimes, the kind sister-in-law's concern seemed more annoying than the nagging mother-in-law. He was already exhausted and on the verge of breaking down, so he was angered by Kazuki's meddling words. If it is because of Master Jang, you don't have to worry. He is waiting for you to realize it yourself. Sure, he might yell at you, but since you've come this far... Swish. The end of the Seal Jihu's spear suddenly headed towards Kazuki. Although it stopped before it reached his neck, the dulled blade regained its sharpness momentarily. He was telling him to shut up unless he was going to help him. Kazuki's eyes narrowed to a slit. "What's the meaning of this? You're asking for a fight? Don't bother me." A raspy voice rang out. Kazuki's eyebrows twitched. "What? I'm telling you not to irritate me. I don't know what I'll do in my current state." Seal Jihu pulled his ice spear back as he glared at Kazuki with his dim eyes. Then he went back to performing the thrust. Kazuki rubbed his neck and gritted his teeth. "Are you really going to be stubborn? Shut up. I know what you mean, so shut up," Seal Jihu growled. He was pushed to the corner and didn't have the peace of mind to behave normally. "I don't understand. What's so wrong for a spearman to throw a spear? Who said I wouldn't?" Pang, the thrust. In an instant, the sound of air exploding rang out from the tip of the spear. Startled by the noise, Kazuki doubted his ears belatedly. "W what? I'll use it, but—" Pang, pang, his strike and cut began to carry the same shock waves as his thrust. However, Seal Jihu remained oblivious and shouted without rest. "I'm saying I don't want to just throw my spear. But why? What if there's a situation where the mana spear doesn't work? You're right, that can happen. If there's a situation like that, just leave it to us. There's a reason Earthlings move around in teams. What if the team is in trouble when my mana spear doesn't work? Are we playing 21 questions?" Seal Jihu laughed. It was a clear, derisive laugh. "Want to know what I heard? I heard that the banquet is full of uncertainties and randomness." Kazuki became speechless. "Can you guarantee what you just said?" "You can't. No one can be sure about anything. So what's wrong with wanting to prepare for that 1 in 10,000 chance?" Seal Jihu roared as if he was shouting his death throes. "I don't want to stand there unable to do anything like that time Chohong collapsed. From the way he was babbling on, it sure looked like he'd gone crazy." Kazuki smacked his lips and let out a long sigh. "Crazy fool. Crazy fool. Do I look like a crazy fool to others? Fine, they can call me crazy all they want." After finally finishing his 3,000th thrust, strike, and cut, Seal Jihu threw his spear down and began running like crazy. Just like that, the 5th day went by as did the 6th. Finally, the 7th day dawned. That was also the first day that a hint of bitterness appeared on Jang Maldong's face. There was a time when he thought this, that it was his fate to come to paradise. He couldn't be blamed. He had a gold mark and 2 innate abilities, neither of which anyone else seemed to have. Furthermore, everything he did was smooth sailing. He remembered snickering to himself, thinking that if a protagonist existed in paradise, it had to be him. However, this thought started to fall apart when he left the neutral zone. Seal Jihu wasn't the protagonist. He felt it. When he looked around even a little bit, he saw people who were 1,000 times stronger than him. Because he always put himself in missions exceeding his capabilities, he almost lost his life multiple times. He survived pitifully and desperately. He was nothing like what the protagonist would look like. It was the same for getting stronger. The protagonists from novels got stronger easily by finding treasures and having fortuitous encounters. But he wasn't like that. His talent was exceedingly average, and although he was giving it his all, he wasn't seeing much progress. And now, even the abilities that made him special were beginning to strangle him. It wasn't anyone's fault but his. He could only arrive at one conclusion to put in effort. The moment the youth realized that he wasn't special, the only thing he could do was put in painstaking, blood-curdling effort. This was the reason Seal Jihu didn't quit this hellish training. Suddenly, his escape from the Delphinian Duchy's laboratory popped up in his mind. When he was hungry at first, all sorts of food bounced around in his head. Then he suddenly thought of the refreshing taste of Coke but ultimately desired water. To be more precise, his body began to crave water. His brain, his head, his organs, every cell in his body searched for it. It was the same with training. At first, he was approached by all sorts of temptations. To take a break, to rest when no one is watching, or to take a sip of water and smoke a cigarette. The temptation would tell him, "Why don't you take it easy?" But once he passed this phase, he became reluctant to give in. Even if he wanted to take it easy, he gave it his all because he didn't want to waste everything he'd endeavored before. From that point on, no thoughts entered his mind, and his body moved on its own. But just like Agnes said, even the strongest willpower had its limit: a silent night. Sial Jihu had been unable to complete today's training due to his piled-up exhaustion and was staying up alone to finish it. What number was I on? Was that the 40th? He looked up at the mountain peak with half-closed eyes. He staggered side to side as if he would fall at any moment. Then he felt something snap in his head. When he opened his eyes, he saw the ground. He was just about to climb the mountain slope, so why was he seeing dirt? Ah. His mouth widened. He seemed to have lost consciousness for a couple of seconds. However, he didn't really care. The end. He felt the strength supporting his body leave. Should I lie down? It's fine. I just have to faint. I'm not quitting. It's just that I have no choice but to faint. Right, it was an impossible training regime from the start. Kazuki said it too, that this training was designed to make me quit. Let's lie down. I did more than enough. Slowly, he grew closer to the spider-filled dirt. A thin smile emerged from his widened mouth. I just have to close my eyes. It will feel like heaven when I lie down on the wet dirt. It will cool my heated body and embrace me gently. It'll be comfortable. Since there's something blocking my path like a wall, it's not like I can run anyways. Strength entered his lifeless eyes. Even at this moment, he was getting closer to the ground. On one hand, he felt a strange sense of déjà vu, almost like he had experienced this once before. Just as his face was about to touch the ground, the youth's complexion was suddenly captured by his mental conflict. I want to lie down. I want to lie down and close my eyes. Quack, his hands touched the ground by a hair's breadth wall, the wall. The wall had finally come for him. The moment before his collapse, he finally saw the limit he could overcome. Now what? I have to overcome it. He focused strength into his arms and pushed himself up. He stepped forward onto the mountain slope with his screaming legs. And thus, Sial Jihu began to run once more. Crazy. That was the evaluation Jang Maldong gave after watching Sial Jihu reach the mountain peak. He thought the youth would finally collapse, but he put his arms out at the last moment and pushed himself up. He then managed to run to his destination. In truth, he never expected him to follow his training. In gaming terms, it was as if he defeated a boss that couldn't be killed by dealing damage to it. In war terms, he had broken his way through ankle mines, PMD series mines, M16 mines, claymore mines, trap wires, and even anti-tank mines. Just what? At this point, it wasn't a simple matter of being stubborn or tenacious. The human body was more honest than one might think. Even if someone tried to hold on with their willpower, the brain would cut off all signals if things seemed dangerous. But the fact that he was going this far, just what are you, meant that he had endured pain exceeding this training. Although Jang Maldong's training sought to put his life at risk, it was still a simulated risk. The youth had clearly confronted multiple real life-threatening experiences. While Jang Maldong was standing in shock, Sial Jihu ran to the other mountain peak, leaving only a single hill behind. One step, then the next. Soon he slowed down and faltered. Jang Maldong stared at him nervously before blinking his eyes in surprise. He was crying. What was he so frustrated about? His eyes were still rolled back, but he was gritting his teeth to continue climbing. Jang Maldong was about to subconsciously make his way down, but stopped. He bit his lower lip before opening his mouth. There's one left. When the youth staggered and almost fell, Jang Maldong scowled and struck the ground with his cane. Hurry up. Are you going to give up now when you're almost done? Twitch. Sial Jihu flinched. Ook-huke. With his trembling arms and legs, he clenched his teeth and held back his tears before finally managing to return to the starting point. Crash. A tumbling sound rang out the moment he arrived. Soon, his trembling body sprawled down. After a moment of silence, Jang Maldong opened his mouth. What's the reason? I've lived a long life, but I've never seen anyone like you. What's the reason you're going so far just to participate in the banquet? Crazy brat. Neutral zone. It seemed he hadn't fainted yet as mumblings came out along with his panting. I became blind without any preparation, skeletons. Almost died, so I vowed. Words that were hard to understand came out of his mouth. I see your determination. With a short sigh, Jang Maldong threw what was in his hand. TK, a fist-sized pouch landed next to him. It's competence. Sial Jihu's eyes shone. There was competence among the village head's medicine. No paradise had competence. Competence? What's there to be surprised about? Most items in the neutral zone were made in paradise. Now that he thought about it, it really was like that. Saikai's tears was something a paradisian concocted as well. Well, I didn't think I'd see it here either. After all, its brewing method disappeared when the empire fell. Because of its rarity, it should fetch a nice price. Do you want to sell it? Sial Jihu shook his head vehemently. Why would he sell it when he desperately wanted them? Jang Maldong opened his mouth as if he predicted as much. Then starting from today, drink 1 bottle before you start your training. The quality of training will go up starting tomorrow. You might be able to pull it off if you drink that competence. When Sial Jihu opened the pouch and saw bottles filled with milky liquid, his head shot up. Pardon? Nothing's changed. Jang Maldong grumbled with a somewhat solemn voice. What matters is that you lasted another day. I'll pack my bags the moment I see you slacking, got that? Jang Maldong turned around. He paused his steps before he went back into the cave and spoke with a softened expression. Rest. It will only get harder from tomorrow. No, perhaps it was more appropriate to describe his expression as I lost. If Ian knew, he would most certainly fall backward in shock. After all, the youth had defeated the old man who was known for his stubbornness. Go take a shower too before you come back. You smell horrific. HMPH. With a snort, Jang Maldong slowly disappeared into the cave. Sial Jihu remained collapsed on the ground for a while before he staggered up. When he held the pouch in his hand, his exhausted expression became dazed. He had been too out of it to notice before, but a few message windows were hovering in the air. Trait tenacity has been created. Trait patience has evolved to self-command. Your stamina stat increased from high-low to low-intermediate. He'd done it. Having the second part of the stat change wasn't an easy thing to do. Not only did it require more points to increase them artificially, but there was also a huge difference between low and intermediate. What mattered was that Sial Jihu didn't use points to level it up. Unless one was an athlete who trained regularly, the strength and stamina stats were extremely difficult to break through by training. However, Sial Jihu managed to succeed. It didn't increase for the longest time. That was to be expected. Although Sial Jihu never skipped out on training until now, he had never pushed himself to his absolute limit. That was why his stats were maintaining their current rank without going up. But the harsh training he endured in the past week had combined with what he had built up until now, resulting in this increase in stamina. Once he let his body recover, he would be able to feel the difference. Sial Jihu got up with a light-hearted face. He couldn't help but feel ecstatic. During the past 7 days, he had to constantly fight himself without rest. Of course, as a former gambling addict, this wasn't the first time he fought with himself. However, he had only lost until now. But today, he had acquired his first victory, so how could he not be happy? Chapter 108. Evil XXX. When morning dawned, Sial Jihu's eyes opened on their own. Just 7 days ago, he couldn't wake up unless someone woke him up. His body had perfectly gotten used to the training schedule, so it shot up when morning came no matter how tired and exhausted it was. When Sial Jihu dazedly stared into the air with only his upper body up, blood fell down from his nostrils. Ah! He had gotten used to this by now. He wiped his nose clean before he rummaged through the medicine bottles and took out a healing potion and a stamina recovery potion. He drank them down in one gulp. This was because they had the effect of recovering one's energy, although they weren't normally used this way. The village head would be sad if he found out that his prized potions were being used as mere tonics, but Sial Jihu had no other choice. After all, he might have really died if he didn't drink them. And starting from today, there was a new bottle to drink. Sial Jihu looked at the milky medicine bottle Jang Maldong gave him and grinned. From what he found out with the color of general observation, this competence had a 4 times multiplicative effect for 12 hours. Although it paled in comparison to the VIP shop's competence, it was still nothing to scoff at. After emptying the bottle in one gulp, Sial Jihu marched out of the cave commandingly. After breakfast, for some reason, Jang Maldong ended the morning exercise early and dragged Sial Jihu to a large tree measuring more than 2 arms width around. Originally, I planned to make you continue that death-inducing run until the day we go back. Sial Jihu flinched hearing his serious tone. He didn't doubt Jang Maldong for even a second, but it looks like you overcame a wall. It sounded like Jang Maldong knew his stamina broke through. Don't be too happy. People don't say stamina is the foundation to all strength for nothing. You're only getting started. Your freakishly high mana overshadows even some high rankers, but your other stats are too low. He wasn't wrong. Even the difference between high-low and low-intermediate couldn't be taken lightly. Yet Sial Jihu's mana stat was at high-intermediate. It would make some sense if he were a magician who refined mana to materialize spells. But as a warrior who mainly used mana to amplify his physical abilities, this abnormality posed a problem. Of course, that also helps you to exhibit strength well beyond your level and physical abilities. Right, it does, Sial Jihu agreed right away. But the way you said freakishly high makes it sound like it's a bad thing. Isn't that obvious? Jang Maldong chuckled and then crossed his arms. Your mana might flow through your circuit, but it's your body that is influenced by the mana's amplifying effect. Once or twice might be okay, but in the long term, it will have a negative effect on your body. What do you mean by negative effect? HMPH, since you recklessly overwork your body all the time, you should have experienced it already. A constant throbbing of the head, a sudden knot in your stomach, regular dizziness, or a sudden loss of strength. Do any of these ring a bell? A sour look appeared on Sial Jihu's face, like he just bit into a bitter persimmon. The symptoms Jang Maldong described were everything he'd felt whenever he used his mana to the limit. Seeing the youth's speechless face, Jang Maldong clicked his tongue. If the body is a car, then mana is the engine. If the engine overheats and explodes, the entire car will burn up. Don't forget, your engine is a time bomb. Sial Jihu's expression turned solemn. I see. The reason for those strange symptoms was my engine screaming. Those were all things he hadn't thought much of until now. Let's cut the chit-chat. Get in there. Jang Maldong pointed his cane at a large old tree which had dozens of logs hanging from it. At first glance, they seemed to be positioned randomly, but the different direction and height of the logs were signs that they were placed with great care. Sial Jihu walked until he was in the middle of the hanging logs. He looked around and saw a few bloodied logs. What training could this be? Did you drink the competence? Yes. Do you know what the advantage of competence is? Sial Jihu gave a simple reply at Jang Maldong's question. It's increasing the body's rate of improvement. You're not wrong, but you're not entirely correct. If you use it that way, you're only making use of half of the competence's effect. Half. When Sial Jihu tilted his head, Jang Maldong grinned. The real effect of competence is multiplying the efficiency of all activities of the body. Sial Jihu thought, isn't that the same thing? But he didn't say it out loud. The moment he did, he had a strong hunch that he would be smacked with a cane. It'll be better for you to experience it once than to hear it 100 times. Perform the thrust, strike, and cut. Rather than asking here, Sial Jihu swallowed his saliva. The logs were definitely not hanging here as decorations. They were sure to come flying at him during the training. He could easily tell just from the way Jang Maldong grabbed one of the logs. Start. Swish. Swish. Sial Jihu began to perform the spear techniques. After about 20 reps, a log came flying toward his left flank. As he had been on guard expecting something like this to happen, Sial Jihu immediately tried to avoid it by stepping backward. However, thwack, ook. Before he could even take 2 steps, he felt a blunt impact on the back of his head. He wasn't hit. He actually ran into it himself. Who told you to move? Sial Jihu rubbed his head and groaned at Jang Maldong's commanding tone. You can use your 5 senses or rely on your 6th sense. The goal of this training is to dodge without looking behind you. When he shouted, again, Sial Jihu hurriedly returned to the middle. I can't move from this spot. Although he constantly reminded himself, the same thing ended up happening on his second try. He was used to performing the 3 spear techniques in one spot, but having to pay attention to the logs added a whole new level of confusion. TK, 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 TK. In the end, he was smacked in 4 different spots before falling. Clutching his head, he rolled around in pain. Nice going. Come on, how am I supposed to dodge them if I'm not looking? I never told you to dodge without looking. I told you to not look back. Jang Maldung continued calmly. I also told you not to move from that spot, but I never told you not to move at all. Wordplay. When Seol Jihu stared at him with blinking eyes, Jang Maldung closed his eyes gently. He was boiling with anger on the inside, but he opened his mouth with a calm expression. Listen, brat. Stop trying to do things without a plan and use your head. Think about why you're investing your time into this training after drinking a precious competence. He sighed and pointed the cane at him again. You're quite proficient with the thrust, strike, and cut. As long as you get in the right form, you display a high level of spearmanship. But the problem is this. No matter the reason, if your form gets shaken up even a little bit, your level plummets. It no longer stays as spearmanship but devolves into a random waving. Do you know why? Shake, shake. That's because you have no experience. A true expert can block, parry, or dodge the enemy's attack, all the while counter-attacking in the perfect spot. You're saying my attacks are too honest? Don't spout nonsense. Where'd you hear that? You can't even do those honest attacks. Pummeled by cold, hard facts, Seol Jihu was at a loss for words and could only shrug his shoulders. Jang Maldung wasn't wrong. It wasn't like he could ask his opponent in the middle of a fierce battle, I'm trying to do a proper attack, so can you wait a moment? If possible, take a few steps back too. I might be helping you train, but you're the one who is going to make something of it. If you find out what my intentions are in making you do this training and even pull off some level of success, then you'll end up with a great weapon in your hands. A great weapon? Well, it will provide a foundation to correct your twisted mind, technique, and body. Jang Maldung wasn't the type of person to say things in vain. Seol Jihu became a little more serious. What are you doing? Get up. Wait. Wait, what? You don't want to train? 5 minutes, no, 3 minutes? Just give me 3 minutes. Let me think about something. Jang Maldung revealed a look of discontent, but he didn't say no. That was because he could tell Seol Jihu's attitude had changed. After reflecting on everything Jang Maldung said, Seol Jihu opened his mouth. Sir, I have a question. Go ahead. I know what the 5 senses are, but what do you mean by 6th sense? Jang Maldung dropped his head a little and a thin smile spread across his face. Good. The youth wasn't a genius who could understand 10 things if he was taught one. But since he was at least trying to understand more than one, how could Jang Maldung not be happy? I'll give you an example. Have you ever felt like someone was looking at you? Even once? Seol Jihu went, Ah. There were indeed times like that. Was it in high school? When he was enjoying talking with his close female classmates, he often felt a stinging glare. And once he turned around, sensing that something was off, he would always see Yu Xianhua looking at him restlessly. He still didn't know why. After all, they weren't even going out at the time. Looks like you have. The ability to understand something immediately without the need for conscious reasoning, that's what I call the 6th sense. And this 6th sense, it's something that can be trained. If the reaction of your brain or your instincts are what's causing it, then why not? In the end, it's still a physical phenomenon. Seol Jihu exclaimed in awe inwardly. He finally understood why Jang Maldung made him drink the competence. When he picked up his spear and got up, Jang Maldung also prepared himself. Start when you're ready. His signal also changed from start to start when you're ready. These 3 additional words made a whole world of difference. Shortly afterward, Seol Jihu's spear began to stab and slice through the air. After another 20 reps, a rope began to move. Seol Jihu didn't turn back to see where the log was coming from and only focused on the movement of the rope. Soon, when the rope that was moving like a pendulum drew a horizontal line, he slightly raised his leg. An abrasive surface brushed past his foot. That wasn't all. Tong, the sound of a log hitting something rang out. Left. No, is it a bit behind that? He wasn't sure. However, as soon as he heard the sound of something cutting through the air, he twisted his body. and as he spun, he stabbed forward with his spear. That's it. He heard a compliment for the first time, but before he even had the chance to rejoice, a bloody smell spread out from the right side. He reflexively turned his head. Good. In the next instant, his neck felt itchy. Maintaining a high level of concentration, Sial Jihu followed his instincts and lowered his head. Swish. A sandpaper-like sensation brushed past his spine. Excellent. Jang Maldong clenched his fists. Like the saying, praise breeds willingness, Sial Jihu became more excited and heated up about the training. Second week. The training entered a new phase. The content of the training changed quite a bit, but the biggest change was that Jang Maldong began to add detailed advice no matter what training Sial Jihu did, even during weight training. The body can't just be tough. It needs to be made durable so that it can absorb or ward off impact. If it can't be bent like steel, there's a chance it will shatter. He nagged about making the muscles more elastic. Of course, he did more than just physical training. When the morning training ended, Sial Jihu began his mana training under the guidance of Jang Maldong. Flash step is a technique in which you move instantly by using the elasticity that comes from bending your body like a bow. The hellish muscle training ended, and Sial Jihu's ears perked up as he drank water while panting. He was expecting to begin mana spear training, but his interest was piqued after hearing the words flash step. After all, who wouldn't be excited about learning a new ability? Since it uses your entire body, you can say it's closer to a body technique than a foot technique. Jang Maldong pointed at a large tree in the distance. This one was a normal tree that didn't have any logs hanging off of it. You see that, right? Yes. Prepare your mana spear. Excuse me? He couldn't help but do a double take. Jang Maldong immediately gave a more detailed explanation. Use your mana spear to make each leaf fall off. Remember, it's one leaf per spear. Make sure your mana spear doesn't affect the surroundings of the leaf. Then, I would need to make the spear small and weak. Yes, the key is to consume minimal energy to create mana spears. Try it. It won't be easy. Is there a point in doing that? The more mana I put in, the stronger mana spears. That's precisely the problem. Jang Maldong snorted. There are 3 goals for this training. The first is to fix your bad habit. No matter who or what you're fighting, you tend to pour your mana in. Like I said before, if you don't stop now, your body will break apart in the future. The second goal is a matter of efficiency. Since you always use all of your mana to defeat your target, you are unable to do delicate control. In other words, your control over mana is poor. Sial Jihu thought he was quite skilled at controlling his mana, so this came as a surprise. Although he nodded his head in agreement, he still had a few doubts. I understand what you mean, but what does this training have to do with flash step? He asked, figuring that the answer would be related to the third goal. However, Jang Maldong didn't answer outright. You know, Jang Maldong stared at him and grinned. I've been thinking this for a while now, but you really are the type who needs to be taught 10 out of 10 things. Sorry. Interpreting Jang Maldong's words as him needing to be spoon-fed, he hurriedly apologized. Jang Maldong shook his head. You don't need to apologize. You grew up on Earth, so it would be strange if you knew these things. Besides, it's not a bad thing to seek advice. He sighed disappointedly as he looked at Hugo, who was collapsed in the corner. You like soccer? It was a seemingly random question, and although Sial Jihu preferred baseball, he didn't say anything. In terms of soccer, I'm not expecting you to make goals. But if someone passes the ball to you, even if you miss your shot or the goalkeeper blocks it, it's normal to at least try to score. Right? Suppose that you just pass the ball to someone and he's just standing there in a daze. Wouldn't you be mad? I would. Sial Jihu wasn't exactly sure what was going on, but since Jang Maldong sounded like he was complaining, Sial Jihu just went along with it. Right? Few after taking a deep sigh, Jang Maldong smacked his lips. Well, in that sense, you're not half bad. You're decisive as well. It sounded like he was complimenting him. But sometimes, you need to learn to score by yourself. Jang Maldong put more strength into his voice. Receiving passes and scoring is a skill in itself, but there's no guarantee that someone will always pass the ball to you at the right time. Sometimes it might even be impossible. You're saying I should develop a habit of thinking. Yes, to be more precise, you have come to a realization on your own. If you can't do that, even if you become a high ranker, you will only be a halfie, Jiang Maldong said solemnly before raising his cane. Halfie, Xiao Jihu felt like he just heard an important piece of information. Although he had more questions to ask, he decided to focus on the training for now. Jiang Maldong's cane was pointing to the tree. A new training started, but that didn't mean his suffering decreased. In fact, if he was only talking about pain, it was multiplied several folds compared to before. He was bruised all over his body from being struck by the logs. His muscles spasmed, and because he focused on fine control of his mana, he felt drained of energy. Since he still had to run to finish the day, the quantity of training had actually increased. Jiang Maldong really wasn't lying when he'd said it will only get harder from tomorrow. Ooh. Xiao Jihu groaned in pain as he headed to a lake near the cave. Even though all he wanted to do was just lie down when the training was over, he needed to wash up first. The cave was a small and confined space to begin with, and he would be causing the others a massive headache if he went in there smelling horrible. After great struggles, he finally arrived at the lake. He took his training clothes off and carefully dipped his body in the water. His skin stung for a moment, then his body trembled from the gentle flow of the water. It was so refreshing that he wanted to scream from the top of his lungs. But since he was exhausted, he chose to quietly swim along the lake currents. When he pushed his face underwater and loosened his arms and legs, he began to float with only his curved back above the surface. If anyone unfamiliar with the situation was watching him, they would surely think they were looking at a corpse. Of course, Xiao Jihu didn't care about this in the slightest. His head was only filled with thoughts of training. The second week was coming to a close. He was making progress, but he was still clueless as to how the flash step worked. What does fine control of mana have to do with it? It was hard to believe that Jiang Maldong said it without a purpose. Looking back at all the training exercises he'd done, Jiang Maldong's training seemed to be connected with each other. Rather than trying to achieve a single goal with a single training exercise, Jiang Maldong's methods seemed to be arranged so that many things could be learned mid-process. In other words, it was likely that the two goals he heard about were clues to learning the flash step. It was just that Xiao Jihu couldn't figure it out. Xiao Jihu slowly raised his head out of the water before taking a small breath and plunging his head back down. He got rid of all idle thoughts and entrusted his body to the flow. How much time went by? As he was endlessly floating on the lake's surface, feeling the flow of the water, Xiao Jihu suddenly tilted his head. Flow, when this thought crossed his mind, an unknown sensation enveloped his body. He wasn't sure what to make of this sensation, but he subconsciously concentrated on the flow of the water brushing past his body. This was the first time he was experiencing such a phenomenon. He couldn't describe it well, but a regretful feeling swept over him. He felt like something was within his grasp, but was escaping his hands every time. Flow, 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 flow. Xiao Jihu muttered the word flow over and over again as if to clutch at straws. That was when something touched his head. At the same time, his concentration broke along with all the flowing sensation of the water. Xiao Jihu raised his head wistfully. Immediately, something white filled his sight. Judging by its round figure, it seemed to be a rock. He must have hit his head while drifting around the lake. Damn it, just when it was within my grasp. A look of annoyance spread across his face. Disturbed at a critical moment, he felt like he suffered a great injustice. This damned rock. Xiao Jihu slammed his head against the rock. He knew what he was doing was stupid and knew that the rock wasn't at fault. Still, he planted his face on the rock repeatedly. Otherwise, he didn't feel like he could soothe his stomach. Damn it, and in the middle of busily slamming his head, damn it. He suddenly felt that something was off. His head should hurt given how hard he was slamming it into the rock, but he couldn't feel a thing. In fact, he felt like his brain was enjoying it. Looking at the rock again, he realized that it was too white to be a marble. It was as if he was looking at a ball of snow. What is it? When he rubbed his cheek against it, he felt its squishiness. The elasticity of the supposed rock was so soothing that he wanted to rub his face against it forever. There was a rock like this. Rather mystified, Jihu dug his face into the soft surface. His face sunk right in. When he took a deep breath just to be sure, the fragrant smell of at this point, Jihu had an inkling as to what the rock was. Peak. He glanced to the side and saw another rock right there. Twin rocks, no. It was too smooth, round, and pretty to be a rock or a boulder. Jihu slowly looked up. His gaze went past a slim, porcelain-like waistline and climbed up the curve of a back with artistic beauty. When his gaze went above the neckline and confirmed the red lips clenching down, his eyes quivered. So, a chilling voice just as icy as her cold gaze shot down. "How long do you plan on smelling my butt?" Hick. Jihu shot back in terror. Under the silent night sky, inside the lake gleaming with starlight, Agnes was covering her upper body with her arms, with her back pointed toward him. Her dazzling beauty made him wonder if he was looking at the goddess of beauty. Her hair wasn't tied up like usual, giving her a whole new look than what he was used to. No, wait. Admiring her beauty could wait. Jihu snapped out of his daze and began to beg in a flustered gibberish, that it wasn't on purpose, that he was mistaken while thinking about something else. "I'll believe you." He was prepared to be beaten up until he was a step away from death when he heard this and couldn't believe his ears. "Did I hear that correctly?" "You see, I was a bit surprised too," Agnes muttered as she stealthily turned her sharp gaze. "I had my guard down, but to think I wouldn't notice you approaching. If you approached with the intention of peeking, there's no way I wouldn't have noticed. At the very least, I believe that you were thinking about something else." Jihu's mouth opened slightly. "So?" Agnes tried to raise her glasses out of habit, and then went back to covering her upper body when she realized she wasn't wearing them. "What were you thinking about?" She sounded like she wouldn't let him leave in one piece if she wasn't satisfied with his answer. "Why, you see, I was thinking about my new ability when the flow of the water suddenly." When Jihu confessed everything he had experienced, Agnes's eyes widened and a fed-up expression surfaced on her face. Jihu was washing up after a long, tiring day of training. The fact that he was still thinking about training meant he had to be a masochist when it concerned training. "I've told you time and time again, resting is part of training. What you're doing is overworking your exhausted brain." "Right, but what Master Jiang said kept bothering me." "Master Jiang. What did he say?" "Something about being a half-high ranker." Agnes went, "Ah," then made a dull smile. It was as if she was saying that he was worried for nothing. That's Master Jiang being stubborn. Stubborn? Yes, it's his personal philosophy. By his logic, 80% of all high rankers would be halfies. "I see." Jihu nodded his head, but he still couldn't hide his disappointment. Agnes's tongue licked her upper lip. "Anyways, you said you were thinking about the flow of water. Perhaps that's a clue to arriving at the answer." Jihu looked up. "Really? I can tell you if you'd like." "Real and no." Jihu's face brightened at Agnes's suggestion, but then he quickly waved his hand in refusal. "It's fine, I want to do this by myself." Agnes nodded her head as if that was a fine choice. "I understand." "I wish you good luck." "Thank you, and I'm really sorry about before." Jihu bowed from the waist. Agnes turned away. "Anyways, you should stop floating around the lake just because the training isn't going well. You might drown if you accidentally fall asleep." With that, Agnes headed to the center of the lake with smooth movements. Jihu was standing like a stone statue until now. Realizing that he was beginning to tremble, he quickly followed Agnes like a duckling chasing after its mother. He thought that the water was deep, but the ground was protruding up where Agnes was standing, so that's why. As he saw Agnes getting farther away, Jihu rubbed his nose and cheeks. Then he let out a small chuckle. To think the evil rock that interrupted his thoughts was Agnes's butt. Wait, then it's not an evil rock. He knew that he would be killed the moment he laughed, so he held his breath and reined in his laughter from bursting out. The morning dawned. When Jiang Maldong woke up in the morning, he became speechless at the sight in front of the cave. 4 people were running together. Agnes, Kazuki, and even Hugo were there. That wasn't all. In terms of stamina, it was correct for Ainz to be in the lead, followed by Hugo, Kazuki, and Seol Jihu. However, Seol Jihu was running in the front, with Ainz chasing after him. They were running so fast that they were pouring with sweat. Brat. The youth could barely follow his training in the beginning, but now he was even leading the group. Seeing him so passionate, the old man couldn't help but feel a little lump in his throat. He was proud. Compared to the two idiots who paid for a ceremony to have him die, the youth was like a saint. Not long afterward, Kazuki and Hugo stopped. However, Seol Jihu was still running non-stop. It was truly an unbelievable sight. I'm not training so that I can run away. He began to see the youth in a different light. He had no other choice but to re-evaluate his willpower. Ha! Jang Maldong laughed happily and watched Seol Jihu and Ainz climb up a hill to where he was. It was then, he blinked in surprise as he saw the duo getting closer. Ainz seemed to be running at full speed but seemed to be unable to pass Seol Jihu. That was impossible from a logical standpoint. Wait a minute. Now that he thought about it, Seol Jihu was running abnormally fast. Soon, the youth climbed up the hill with a storm of dust behind him. As soon as he touched the starting point, he turned to the side. "Why are you doing this?" he screamed and quickly made his way down the other side of the hill. His arms swung in quick succession, and his legs were barely visible. While Jang Maldong was looking at him in a daze, Ainz reached the starting point and quickly chased after him. "Stop right there. At least give me an explanation." "Shut up. This is the third time." The incident began early morning while Jang Maldong was still asleep. Ainz got up at the same time as Seol Jihu and advised him to eat breakfast. They ended up eating together, but Seol Jihu remembered the previous night's incident and snickered. He thought he was being secretive, but there was no way someone of Ainz's caliber wouldn't have noticed. Seeing Seol Jihu dodge her gaze, she became convinced. She checked her status window just to be sure and erupted when she saw that evil butt had been added. Seol Jihu ran away immediately. "Evil butt? What's so evil about my butt?" I only thought about it in my head." "I'll kill you once I get my hands on you." "Miss Ainz? You're dead." Ainz's voice echoed out far and wide. Meanwhile, Jang Maldong blankly watched the youth desperately running away with his festina earring in full use. Chapter 109. At the end of the hellish training, time flowed like a stream. On the third week, an incident popped up causing Ainz Kazuki to leave the huge stone Rocky Mountain. He seemed to want to stay until the last day, but after he was contacted by his comrades, he showed a rare expression of anger. It seemed something unexpected occurred while preparing for the banquet. In the end, Kazuki asked Jang Maldong to be excused and left for Haramark on the same day. Seol Jihu didn't hear the details, but since Kazuki personally had to go back to deal with it, he guessed it wasn't a small problem. Once Kazuki left, evil, no, Ainz also lost her reason to stay as an observer. She didn't go back right away. Instead, she helped Seol Jihu train for another week before returning to Haramark. Not knowing the inside story, Seol Jihu carefully guessed that Ainz was running away from Jang Maldong's training. Although the group of 5 was now reduced to 3, Seol Jihu didn't mind it too much. In fact, he was a bit happy, as this meant that he was spending more time under Jang Maldong's watch. Now that he had experienced Jang Maldong's training, he could easily understand why he was called Paradise's best trainer. He had more than a few good points that made him worthy of his reputation. First, he prioritized the process more than the result. It wasn't that he didn't care about the result, just that he encouraged his students to make gains from the process. He made his students understand the goal of the training and realize what they were lacking. In a way, it was as if he was fattening them up little by little. Seol Jihu, who only knew how to train his physical body, fell in love with the new sixth sense training method. He felt like a new horizon was opening up for him every day. Jang Maldong didn't hate it either. Unlike certain ungrateful idiots, this new disciple of his was excited to train and was constantly asking for more. How could he possibly not be pleased? As a result, Seol Jihu felt the emotion known as joy for the first time in ages. Even though he was both physically and mentally exhausted, he was happy to train without caring about anything else. To top it off, he had someone guiding him, and he could feel himself getting stronger by the day. He didn't even realize the time passing as he enjoyed spending each and every day on huge stone Rocky Mountain. Time flew, and the night of the 5th and final week came by. The past 35 days were long to Hugo but short to Xiao Jihu. Jiang Maldong went all out during training, but he didn't strangle his students for time in their everyday life. He notified Chohong that they would be returning the next day and held a small party. He definitely wasn't the type to take lead and hold such a thing, but he couldn't help himself because Xiao Jihu was so endearing. As a result, he personally went out and captured a wild boar that incidentally looked just like Hugo. He prepared the boar, built a fire, and cooked it all by himself. Adding together a whiskey cooled in the mountain's flowing stream water, he truly felt like he was in paradise. Hugo took a bite out of the scrumptious meat along with a sip of whiskey. After emptying the glass clean, he became overly chatty, saying he'd have no regrets if he died right now. Jiang Maldong's cooking skills were unexpectedly good, so Xiao Jihu couldn't get his act together as he devoured the meat. The meat practically melted in his mouth, giving off a sweet, savory flavor. In truth, with only a single dish, the meal could hardly be called a party. However, Xiao Jihu enjoyed this moment and made it an unforgettable memory. As the night advanced, the fat boar was left with only its bones and the blazing campfire with only flickering embers. Xiao Jihu couldn't defeat the after-meal languor and sprawled down on the ground. His body was devoid of tension since he ate and drank to his heart's content. But rather than staying on the ground and looking at the stars, he jumped up and stretched. Wondering why he was fussing around at this hour, Jiang Maldong, who was cleaning up the mess, asked, "What are you doing?" "Warming up." "Ah, let me help you." Xiao Jihu stopped twisting his body side to side and ran to help with the cleanup. From the way he was hurrying so much, Jiang Maldong could tell he was dying to start training. On the other hand, he let out a sigh as he glanced at Hugo, who was lying on the ground belly up. "Pathetic, don't you think?" "Me? And no, not at all." "What? Why?" "Well, I've never defeated Hugo before." Jiang Maldong meant to say Hugo was a good-for-nothing who only knew how to eat and drink. But Xiao Jihu seemed to have taken it as Hugo slacking off on training. Jiang Maldong laughed inwardly. Unless the youth's head was filled with nothing but training, he wouldn't have understood it that way. "He's always ahead of me when we're running, and he can dodge the logs a lot longer than me." Xiao Jihu continued to mutter in his misunderstanding, but Jiang Maldong didn't point out his error. Humans were rather simple creatures at times. The moment they were satisfied, they would start to fall behind. If Xiao Jihu ever went, "I've trained so much. I should be more than strong now," then Jiang Maldong planned to teach him a lesson. Of course, it was true that Xiao Jihu put in a lot of effort. Even by basic calculations, he had done 119 days' worth of training. But from Jiang Maldong's perspective, Xiao Jihu had only filled a small portion of what he was lacking. If he were satisfied when he only just built his foundation, his growth would slow down. However, Xiao Jihu wasn't satisfied. He didn't let his guard down or look down on others just because he did some training. Jiang Maldong wasn't sure if that was just how the youth was, but as far as he could see, it was one of his few strong points. Hugo has been doing these for several years now, so it should be second nature to him. To be honest, he didn't need to come here in the first place. Hugo nodded his head arrogantly while still lying down on the ground. Seeing this, Jiang Maldong immediately raised his cane, saying, "You idiot." Hugo screamed and ran off. "Damned fool." Jiang Maldong shook his head. "Let's go take a walk. It's not good for your stomach to run right after a meal." Xiao Jihu was about to ask, "If that's the case, why did you push me so hard the first week?" But in the end, he quietly followed him. Thinking about it now, it seemed that he wanted him to face his limits. Of course, the real reason was that he still hadn't put his cane down. Soon, when the duo arrived at a small open area, Jiang Maldong opened his mouth. "I heard from Miss Agnes that you were worried about becoming a high ranker." "Pardon? You weren't? Then did Miss Agnes lie?" "No." "Stinking brat. You're worried about the high rank when you're not even level 4 yet." Jang Maldong snickered. Sial Jihu didn't know what to say, so he just scratched his head. He thought Agnes was pretty tight-mouthed, so he took this as her way of getting back at him for the butt incident. Well, considering the speed of your growth. Right, let me ask you while we're at it. What do you think the high rank is? Sial Jihu could only blink his eyes at the unexpected question. You don't have to think so hard about it. High rank. It's exactly what it sounds like, a high position. Now, what do you think position refers to? I'm not sure. Now that you mention it, I guess it's kind of vague. I doubt you're asking me for the dictionary definition. Of course not. I think it refers to a realm. When Sial Jihu stayed silent, Jang Maldong changed his question. How many high rankers do you think there are in paradise? I have no idea. Sial Jihu looked as if Jang Maldong was asking him a stupid question. After all, how would he know anything about it? Let's see. If you consider this mountain to be the population of Earth. Jang Maldong raised his cane. Then this surrounding area would be people who are given the opportunity to enter paradise. He took a look around their immediate vicinity and said, the ones who pass the tutorial and the neutral zone and actually enter paradise would be here. He poked the small open space where he and Sial Jihu were standing. And the people who survive for a few years to become level 4s would be in here. He dragged his cane on the dirt and drew a large circle. It was about 1/4 the size of the open space. And the people who become high rankers. Jang Maldong bent down. He grabbed a handful of dirt and showed it to Sial Jihu. Are here. Sial Jihu was watching him slowly, and a small lump went down his throat. Seeing Jang Maldong put it like this, he realized just how amazing high rankers were. Kim Hannah's words suddenly brushed past his head. She'd said that even the gifted needed 4 to 5 years to get to level 5. Then, after staying silent for a long time, Sial Jihu asked calmly, and in your opinion, how many among them are true high rankers? Jang Maldong grinned. He opened his palm, and the dirt fell through his fingers. What remained in his hand was only a tiny fraction. And these true high rankers, you said they're the ones who learn things on their own and grow without relying on Paradise's system? Sial Jihu asked with a hint of anticipation. Jang Maldong thought for a moment before shaking his head. You're half right and half wrong. I call them true and false high rankers, but it isn't as if any wandering dog can become a high ranker. Jang Maldong continued. First, I want to make it clear that I have no intention of undermining any high ranker. Not a single one of them rose to that position by sitting on the sidelines and taking a dump. They must have had their fair share of struggles. Jang Maldong dusted off his hand. Then he quietly announced the twist. But, as you might have already experienced, Paradise attracts all sorts of people. Right. You can tell just by what goes on in the neutral zone. Among the dozens of newbies, there are always 1 or 2 special ones, the so-called gifted ones. Sial Jihu was reminded of Odalette Delphine and nodded his head subconsciously. But the funny thing is, there are differences even among the gifted ones. The one who's more talented, the one who's more special. You can go on, and eventually, you'll find someone who's unrivaled among the gifted. A heaven beyond heaven. Sial Jihu suddenly thought of this saying. People like that will go above learning skills on their own and will tread their own paths. They will enter unique realms no one else has ever reached. I call that enlightenment. An independent path, a unique realm. Sial Jihu tilted his head and asked, could Dylan have? If you're talking about Dylan's lightning, you're a bit off. Infusing electricity into mana, the idea is good, but that only constitutes as thinking outside the box. It's far from enlightenment. What about Cho Hong? It's the same. Cho Hong is a special case. Because she is originally a priest, she only strengthened her manifestation ability. It was quite a stingy evaluation considering that Carp Diem was one of Haramark's best teams. Sial Jihu shook his head. I'm not sure I get it. I don't expect you to. Well, I'm not trying to discuss martial arts theories with you, but... Jang Maldong took a brief pause before opening his mouth again. In the past, I've seen someone move like his body and weapon were one. That wasn't something as simple as a movement technique. Moving like the body and weapon were one. Are you talking about the famous one with the sword? Sial Jihu asked, remembering the martial arts novels he used to read. I've heard that it was something like that. When Jang Maldong agreed, Sial Jihu's expression waned. One person seeks the path of formlessness, another seeks the path of the thousand sword. Puha! Sial Jihu's laughter interrupted Jang Maldong. The former quickly covered his mouth. Is that funny? And no, it's just that the names. He was okay with formlessness, but he couldn't stop himself when he heard thousand sword. They were both terms he was somewhat familiar with from martial arts novels. Sial Jihu put strength into his hand to hold back his laughter. Seeing this, one corner of Jang Maldong's mouth curled up. HMPH, let's see you laughing when you face 1,000 swords flying straight at you. The smile on Sial Jihu's face vanished. 1,000 swords attacking him simultaneously. By common sense standard, that was simply impossible. But because of his past life-threatening experiences, Jang Maldong's words didn't seem like a joke. Brat, don't ridicule them unless you've pioneered your own independent realm and can stand toe-to-toe with them. Sorry, I'm not laughing because I'm ridiculing them. I know, the name Thousand Sword is a bit strange. I laughed when I first heard it too. You too, MM. His abilities are the real deal, though. Jang Maldong rubbed his forearm as if he was reminded of a bad memory. Anyways, these are who I call true high rankers. If high rankers are that amazing. Sial Jihu made a tired expression before clearing his throat and asking, Sir, what about the unique rank? I don't know, Jang Maldong answered immediately. I can say this and that about high rankers because I am a high ranker myself. He tilted his head up and looked at the sky. But the unique rankers are like the stars in the sky. I can't get anywhere close to them even if I reach out my hands, so how can I dare to evaluate them? Sial Jihu let out a long sigh. He felt that he still had a long way to go. At the same time, he found out that he was just a frog in a well. The world was wide, and there were many gifted people. Seeing the youth's dejected look, Jang Maldong smiled. You were laughing before, but now you're all down. It just seems so far out of reach. What's there to worry about? You're also walking your own path and making proper preparations for it, though we don't know what lies at the end of it. Making preparations? What do you mean? Didn't I tell you that you have to constantly devote yourself to balance your mind, technique, and body before becoming a high ranker? This isn't an easy thing to do. Sial Jihu tilted his head as if he had no clue what Jang Maldong was talking about. Never in my life have I seen someone whose mind, technique, and body are so twisted. You mean? Never mind true and false and all that. Just focus on balancing your mind, technique, and body. It's not an easy path to tread, but I believe it has potential. Balancing the mind, technique, and body. The moment he heard this, vitality returned to his lifeless eyes. I'm going to go running. Sial Jihu immediately turned around. Now that he was shown a way to get stronger, his body became heated until it couldn't handle standing still. That's fine, but do it in moderation. It's still dark, and if you get hurt, you won't be able to go to the banquet. Sial Jihu flinched in the middle of putting on his sandbags, and if you get the opportunity, you can attempt stage 3 as well. Go see what position you're in. Sir. Sial Jihu turned his head. Seeing his dropped jaw, Jang Maldong clicked his tongue. Don't get ahead of yourself. Entering stage 3 is all up to luck. It's not like Dylan and Kazuki couldn't go because they were lacking in skills. Who cared? Sial Jihu was more than happy to hear Jang Maldong giving him permission. Just this single moment felt like a generous reward for everything he had suffered so far. Yes, Sial Jihu shouted with spirit before starting to run. Seeing the youth getting farther away, Jang Maldong revealed his teeth in a grin. He had confirmed something with the training in the huge stone Rocky Mountain. From what he had observed so far, he could see all sorts of possibilities. Jang Maldong put his hand in his pocket and touched his needle case. It was the same case he had vowed to never open again. If it's him, his hand fiddled with the case. He knew Sial Jihu was amassing stat points. However, he didn't know Sial Jihu had several divine elixirs along with the divine stigmata saved up for when he reached the high rank. If he did, he might have mulled over his decision a bit more. In any case, Jang Maldong's eyes were clearly burning as he stared in the direction the youth disappeared to. Xiao Jihu wasn't the only one looking forward to the day he became a high ranker. After all, Jiang Maldong was a trainer. Just like Agnes, he was thrilled to see a high-quality gem in the rough. And as far as his desire to refine it went, he was confident he wouldn't lose out to anyone else. What would happen when the youth's chaotic mind, technique, and body became one, or what form it would take, Jiang Maldong had no clue, and that only made him look forward to it even more. Right. In Jiang Maldong's eyes, Xiao Jihu was a gem that only now had begun the refining process. As long as he was refined well, Jiang Maldong was confident that he would shine brighter than anyone else. After bursting out into a hearty laughter, he let out a few dry coughs. What am I laughing about at this age? He was a bit embarrassed by his childish anticipation, but the fire in his heart refused to diminish. Thus, to cool the heat in his chest, he had to walk around for a long time. Just like that, the final night in huge stone Rocky Mountain passed, and morning dawned. Chapter 110. The reason she is here. Cho-Hong arrived at the huge stone Rocky Mountain around noon. She was unable to sit or walk comfortably the entire trip, even though she was visiting what should be a nostalgic place. Since the only memories she had of the mountain were rolling on the ground like a dog, taking a breath of air made her feel more disgusted than refreshed. Being a temporary leader really saved my ass. After arriving at the place Jiang Maldong had told her about, Cho-Hong let out a deep sigh before craning her neck out and looking around the vicinity. She could see something black moving in a zigzag from one mountain peak to the other in the distance. She waited until it came near, and when she waved her hands, Hugo stopped after descending the mountain slope. He looked at Cho-Hong and wiped off his dripping sweat. "You're here. Rejoice. Your Messiah has come to save you from your distress." "Messiah, why couldn't you have come earlier?" "Watch what you say. This mountain is the territory of an evil devil. Even I, the Messiah, have to risk unimaginable danger to get here." "Fuck, you call yourself a Messiah when your own safety is the first thing on your priority list." When Hugo grumbled, Cho-Hong giggled uncontrollably. "Since you're still up and running, I'm guessing that it wasn't half bad, huh?" No. Hugo shook his head and grinned. "I trained earnestly while a certain someone was lazing around at home." "Oh, just you wait. I'll show you the fruits of my training, phew. Cho-Hong's facial muscles twitched hearing Hugo's declaration of war. She placed her hand by her ear and leaned forward toward him. "What did you say?" "Never mind." "What? Are you deaf?" "Huh, oh, I'm sorry. I just couldn't hear what you said because it was coming from a loser who's not even a high ranker." Hugo's expression stiffened. "Why, you're only a false high ranker." "MHM, next level 4 who can't even become a false high ranker, please." "Bitch." Hugo pounced on her before quickly backing off. Cho-Hong had taken out her +2 thorn of steel. "Kaya, look at this thing. It's gorgeous no matter how many times I marvel at it. Don't you agree?" "Fuck you." "You know, I've actually been itching for a fight. For some reason, I haven't seen a single monster on my way up here either." When Cho-Hong glanced at him, Hugo flinched and shouted in injustice. "Why, you just got lucky with Sial giving you that mace. Like you're the one to speak. Didn't you take Khan's halberd when he died in the Forest of Denial? That and this are separate matters." Yeah, Tilda, what can I do, Tilda?" "Sial just likes me more. If you aren't happy, go appeal to him too, Tilda." Cho-Hong smirked and sneered at Hugo. "Anyways, should you really be worried about me? You lost all your equipment when you got captured last time." Cho-Hong stabbed where it hurt the most, and Hugo's face contorted. In the end, "Hua-ang." He burst into tears and ran off. "HMPH, you're no match for me." Cho-Hong snorted and walked onward leisurely. Soon she spotted a bizarre old tree. It was a tree measuring more than 2 arms width around, but more importantly, its leaves had all fallen on the ground. Damn, the old man must have come up with another strange training method. That was the first thing she thought of when she saw this poor old tree. Soon, she found the cave hideout on the hill. When she saw Jiang Maldong standing in front of it, she immediately bowed down to her waist. Jiang Maldong replied without even looking at her. "You're here." "I am. You look nice. How can you tell when you haven't even looked at me?" "I only need to hear your voice to know. If you're thinking about making me train, stop dreaming." I need to go back soon to take care of an important matter. Chohong paused, as Jang Maldong had raised his hand. However, he was staring into the distance with a thoughtful look. Chohong also turned her gaze. There, she saw a youth stabbing and slicing the air with a spear. He displayed a series of spear techniques while dodging about a dozen wooden logs flying toward him. You're already making him do that? Be quiet. Jang Maldong crossed his arms, tapping his arm with his right thumb. Oh, Chohong exclaimed in surprise, seeing Seol Jihu dodge the logs rather well. How many has he dodged so far? Over 100. Chohong stood tall and watched the youth with a relaxed expression. However, that only lasted a moment. Once the youth surpassed 200 and then 300 dodges, she couldn't help but jump in surprise. Isn't this his first training? The moment she asked this, Seol Jihu collapsed. Several logs had unexpectedly shot toward him from all directions. Perhaps he had miscalculated as he couldn't dodge one of them and was struck on his side. Jang Maldong's thumb stopped. 312. A satisfied smile bloomed on his aged face. So he finally surpassed 300. That's his newest record. Chohong whistled. Wow, then again, my highest record is 1008. You pulled that off once. But a record is a record. You're right, though you did take over a year to accomplish that. Chet. Chohong turned away. Jang Maldong smiled as he watched Seol Jihu kicking himself before turning around and facing Chohong. So what's this important matter? It's not just one or two things. There's even this huge incident. Speak. I'll explain on our way back. The carriage driver is probably shaking in his seat. You sure are pulling all sorts of tricks to avoid training. I'm not. Anyways, hurry, Chohong shouted indignantly before running down the hill. Jang Maldong smirked and then shouted that the training was over. Seol Jihu and Hugo immediately came running. As they had already packed their bags in the morning, it didn't take long for them to get going. Hut! Hut! Seol Jihu threw his bags over his shoulder and then glanced back. Looking at the cave he had stayed in for the past month, a bittersweet feeling welled up inside him. I can always come back later. Shortly afterward, he made a refreshing smile and turned back. The carriage carrying Carp Diem's 4 members began to race toward Haramark at full speed. So what's this huge incident? Jang Maldong asked once the speed picked up. Chohong, who was grumbling about the sweaty smell Hugo and Seol Jihu were giving off, spat a mouthful of saliva out of the carriage before opening her mouth. First, hundreds of villagers from Ramen village moved into the city. Oh yeah. As Jang Maldong felt deep sympathy and all sorts of indebtedness towards Paradisians, he immediately expressed his interest. Ho-ho, that should have happened a long time ago. After all, Ramen village is close to the border region. Anyways, I suspect that there were some unhappy voices. There's also the problem with where they would stay. Actually, it's been pretty quiet. Quiet? I doubt those bastards playing real estate would sit still and watch. What can they do when the rightful owner of the land tells them to give it up? Well, the royal family took the initiative to concede half of the land to the villagers. More importantly, the Temple of Luxuria publicly announced their support for the Haramark royal family's decision. The Temple of Luxuria did. Jang Maldong was looking at the youth sitting next to him with a grin when he heard this and became surprised. They didn't just support the royal family with words. They said they would even support the move directly. Chohong continued. In fact, just a few days after the announcement, the daughter of Luxuria appeared in Haramark. What? Jang Maldong's eyes widened greatly. Hugo also dropped his jaw, and then a gulp went down his throat. The executor is personally overseeing this matter. No, she's the one who made the announcement. Hey, did you see her? When Jang Maldong and Hugo asked at the same time, Chohong cleared her throat. The Temple of Luxuria made the announcement, but there is a ton of people who think she's the one who made the call. I'm also one of them. Of course, she is someone who has saved paradise from danger numerous times. She must have lent a hand so that there wouldn't be any problem with the move. Jang Maldong nodded his head, referring to her politely. Although they had no prior contact, he saw her in a favorable light from all the stories he had heard about her feats. She is most certainly the type to do something like that. She must have come to Haramark to help with the move personally. Well, Here's where the huge incident comes in. Cho-hong paused as if what she had to say next eclipsed everything she said before. Jang Maldong scowled. "Hurry up and say it." "I'm asking if you saw her." Hugo also shouted. Cho-hong giggled in response. "Remember the building in front of our office that went under construction?" "Now that you mention it, it did change. The owner of that building is the daughter of Luxuria." What? "I know, she moved right in front of us." "Really?" Jang Maldong revealed a strong hint of suspicion, and Cho-hong immediately jumped up. "Come on, have you been tricked your whole life?" "I saw her tending to her garden just this morning." Judging from Cho-hong's reaction, it didn't seem like she was lying. Anyways, that's been the talk of the entire city for the past few days. There was even a huge crowd in front of the building. Why would she move to Haramark? Jang Maldong leaned back in his seat with a face that said he just couldn't figure it out. Then, after a brief moment of silence, he opened his mouth. "It's indeed a huge incident. Now we have another thing to brag about, being neighbors with the daughter of Luxuria." "That's enough nonsense out of you. What about Kazuki?" "He's under a lot of stress." Cho-hong smacked her lips. "He seems to be trying hard, but it looks like there's an outside interference." Jang Maldong furrowed his brows. "Why didn't you help?" "It's not like I didn't want to. I might have connections with archers and warriors, but none with priests. You should know this." Cho-hong shrugged her shoulders, and Jang Maldong showed signs of annoyance. "Tusk, looks like the Japan Business Federation has finally done it." "Well, it's Tsuji Yuki we're talking about here." "Just wait. There's still time left, and I doubt Kazuki will simply sit still." That was the end of the conversation, as Jang Maldong dropped his head and fell into deep contemplation. Cho-hong stretched and slowly leaned against Seol Jihu, who was staring blankly into the air. "Hey, HM. Are you looking at your status window? How is it? Did you make good progress?" Just like Cho-hong said, Seol Jihu was currently busy studying his status window. "Well, your status window, summon date, 2017, 03. 16, marking grade, gold, sex/age, male/26, height/weight, 180.5 cm/70.2 kg. Current condition, healthy, class LV3. Mana Lancer, nationality, South Korea Area 1, affiliation, Carp Diem, alias, top graduate, first star, headache, crybaby, prankster, training, masochist. 2, traits. 1, temperament. Self-command, suppresses emotions, greed, and impulses with the rational will. Tenacity, a deeply rooted temper of wanting to endure pain and struggles. Short-tempered, impatient, and hasty. 2, aptitude. Effort, endeavors with both body and mind to achieve a goal. Average, normal in every way, possesses no particular talent. 3, physical level, strength, low intermediate up arrow 1, endurance, high-low, agility, low intermediate, stamina, low intermediate up arrow 1, mana, high intermediate, luck, low intermediate, remaining ability points, 6, 4, abilities, 1. Innate abilities, 2, future vision, grade unknown, 9 eyes, grade unknown, 2, class abilities, 4, basic spear techniques, thrust high, strike high intermediate, cut high intermediate, mana spear multiple, low intermediate, aura intermediate, mana circulation, high intermediate, 3, other abilities, 2, reinforced circuit, high, intuition, low, 5, level of cognition, moderate actions and thoughts are sensible, hard-working/enthusiastic/chaotic, many things are jumbled up and is impossible to unravel. So you did make progress. When Cho-hong asked again, Seol Jihu chuckled as he rubbed his thinly grown beard. A little. I should be able to call myself a level 3 proudly. Cho-hong rebutted, "Who on Paradise sees you as a level 3? And Seol Jihu immediately returned a wry smile. Honestly speaking, he was quite satisfied with his current status. Since raising the physical level from low to intermediate required 2 ability points, he had gained at least 4 ability points worth of physical level increase. His abilities also made great strides. Learning intuition was something he was especially proud of. Although its grade was low, he was satisfied with just the fact that he had learned it, a foundation to balance my mind, technique, and body. It was then. He was late to notice the change as he was only looking at his physical level and traits, but he had also gained a series of new aliases. Tilting his head, Seol Jihu read the detailed information. First star, the best of the 3 stars that rose in the neutral zone of March 2017. Ooh. He let out a suppressed exclamation of awe. Then, headache causes others great worry. He couldn't hide his surprise. Crybaby, a child who cries easily, prankster, mischievous rascal who likes to pull pranks, training masochist, a training fanatic. Huh. Well, he could see where crybaby, prankster, and training masochist were coming from, but headache. He couldn't agree with headache in the slightest. Who is it? Seol Jihu could think of one person who might be responsible for giving him this alias. At the same time, he remembered something he had forgotten to do and went, "Ah." Phew. Thankfully, it wasn't too late. After breathing a sigh of relief, Seol Jihu reminded himself to take care of it as soon as he returned to Haramark. 7 days remained until the spawning of the entrances. The entire Haramark region was heated up, and Seol Jihu got busy as soon as they returned. First, as he didn't know much about the banquet, he needed to obtain the basic info. Although he could have simply asked Jang Maldong, he decided to go to the library as he wanted to develop a habit of investigating things himself. Second, he needed to quickly procure his defensive equipment, as the previous rescue mission rendered most of his armor useless. I can't just buy anything. He could take care of his problem in a single day by going to Haramark's smithy, but after getting used to the high standards set by his spear, earring, and bracelet, he wanted to purchase good equipment. It's not like I'm short on money. Warriors needing quality armor was the most basic common sense. He figured this would be an excellent opportunity to purchase one. However, there was another issue that needed to be dealt with utmost urgency. Wow, tilde, you're a human being now, tilde, and that was to contact Kim Hannah. Ha ha, don't laugh. You see, I thought you forgot again or were staying put. Beyond the communication crystal, Kim Hannah let out a big yawn as she leaned against the back of her chair. Her arms were resting on the armrest and her legs were placed up on the table, making her look extremely relaxed. Since I decided to trust you, I thought it was the latter. Seol Jihu flinched. So I was thinking, wow, he's really taking it easy, tilde, what a good boy, tilde, and Huck. Kim Hannah paused with her tone going up toward the end of her murmuring. Hey, what happened to your face? My face. Seol Jihu touched his face. You haven't shaved. Like you just came out of the mountains after living there for a month. Only then did Seol Jihu realize the state he was in. Ah, well, there's something I need to tell you. Clunk. Just as he was about to explain, the sound of the door opening rang out. Seol, are you here? For a split second, Kim Hannah was frightened out of her wits, but Seol Jihu didn't notice it as he had turned around to check the door. Sir, Jang Maldong paused in the middle of walking in. You were calling someone. It's fine. I'll come back later. And no, it's fine. Hold on just a moment. And when Seol Jihu looked back at the communication crystal, he subconsciously brought his face near the crystal. Kim Hannah's clothes, hairstyle, posture. There were more than 1 or 2 things he wanted to point out. However, his mouth refused to open up for some reason. I see you want to participate in the banquet. Before he even noticed, her loosened hair was tied up in a neat ponytail. Seol Jihu stared at the crystal before rubbing his eyes with his hands. What's wrong? Are your eyes okay? A soft, caring voice rang out. Kim Hannah could sound this gentle? While Seol Jihu was dumbstruck and confused, Jang Maldong let out a dry cough. Oh my. Kim Hannah's eyes widened like a rabbit's, and she covered her mouth in a graceful manner. Who's that gentleman? Seol Jihu became speechless.